We're going right now.
Sue, I think we're ready to go live.
Mayor, we are going live.
Thank you.
And Mr. Nod, can you turn your camera back on?
I would like to call to order a public hearing pertaining to the proposed amendment of the Community Development Block Grant Citizen Participation. Call to order a public hearing pertaining to the proposed amendment of the Community Development Block Grant Citizen Participation Plan. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Ms. Cummings.
Here.
Mr. Nord.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Here.
Mr. Preston.
Here. Thank you. Due to recent changes in the Open Meetings Act, I felt compelled to make the following statement: that the governor has issued a disaster declaration related to the public health concerns caused by the statewide COVID-19 pandemic. As mayor, I have determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of the risk of exposure to COVID-19 virus stemming from an indoor gathering, and the remote meeting is the best interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the council, the staff, and the general public. Is there anyone wishing to speak on the pertaining to the proposed amendment of the Community Development Block Grant Citizen Participation Plan? Ms. Honker, do we have anyone in the waiting room?
We do not.
Okay, to be sure, one more time, is there anyone in the waiting room wishing to speak pertaining to the proposed amendment of the Community Development Block Grant Citizen Participation Plan? And as we do not, a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Ms. Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Nord.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mayor Coos.
Aye. We are adjourned. Call to order a public hearing pertaining to the proposed revision of the Community Development Block Grant Programs 2020 to 2024 Consolidated Plan and Program Year 2020 to 2021 Action Plan. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Ms. Cummings.
Here.
Mr. Nord.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Here.
Mr. Preston.
Here. Is there anyone here wishing to speak or in the waiting room wishing to speak pertaining to the proposed revision of the Community Development Block Grant Program Consolidated Plan and Program Action Plan? We have anyone in the waiting room?
We do not.
Thank you. One more time, anybody here or in the waiting room wishing to speak pertaining to the proposed revision of the Community Development Block Grant Programs 2020 to 2024 Consolidated Plan and Program Year 2020 to 2021 Action Plan? Hearing no one wishing to speak, motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Ms. Cummings.
Aye.
Mr. Nord.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mayor Coos.
Aye. The public hearing is adjourned. Call to order a regular meeting for the normal town council for Monday, July 6, 2020. Please call the roll.
Mayor Coos.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Ms. Cummings.
Here.
Mr. Nord.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Here.
Mr. Preston.
Here.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. I'm having a blank moment here.
One nation.
Yeah, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Karen. What happens when you get old? First item of business is public comments, and I think we do have people in the waiting room for public comment. Ms. Honker, how many do we have?
We have 3, Mayor.
We have 3. So are they able to hear me in the?
Mayor, they can't hear you in the waiting room. We are going to admit them in the order they registered.
I'm sorry, Ms. Sue, you're breaking up.
So they can't hear you in the waiting room, but we are going to admit them in the order they registered.
Okay, if there was a way, I don't want to have to repeat myself. Is there a way to put me in to the waiting room? If not,
I don't think. Even if you're in the waiting room, you may not be able to communicate with them.
well, I just wanted to explain the rules of public comment.
I can move them into the meeting and you can speak to them as a group as long as they stay muted.
Thank you. Just let me know when that happens. To the members of the public for public comment tonight in the waiting room, just to go over some basic rules, we'd ask that you state your name and preferably your address, although you're not required to do so, for the record, and to let you know that you are limited to 3 minutes of public comment. And with that, having been said, if you would bring the first person in for public comment.
It appears we have lost Doug Fansler, so I'm going to bring in the second.
I'm here.
Oh,
Mr. Fansler, go ahead.
Can you hear me then?
We can.
Okay. Just got a couple points and a few questions that related to those. And I'm sorry, by being on this call, I couldn't hear everything you said at the beginning of the meeting about meeting in person. One of my questions was, when will you start meeting in person? We can dine in restaurants and been able to go to grocery stores throughout the shutdown. Governor Pritzker's executive orders have been deemed void ab initio, which is void from the beginning of April 8th. And again, I didn't hear the beginning of that. I apologize. The phone, being on the phone and watching the video weren't something that I could do at the same time. Why is the communication director position being hired now after the pandemic with cost cutting needed? It makes very little sense to add staff until the unknowns become known. The sidewalk and trail crossings at College not being approved by the railroad before moving forward with the special meeting last week or a few weeks ago. Seems that staff did not learn from the past that getting a rail approval early and in writing should have been done before committing any town dollars. I also think, and from past meetings when we've been in person, that being able to have signs in the town meeting was not allowed. I'm not sure why signs are allowed during the Pledge of Allegiance by councilmen if people can't have signs in your meeting. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Fansler, I would remind you that public comment is items that are germane to the agenda, and you chose to ignore that tonight. Our next speaker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Matt Hawkins, Butterfly Drive in Normal. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about the Illinois Fire Junior Sports Complex. The Bloomington Normal Area Convention and Visitors Bureau and Bloomington Normal Area Sports Commission recognize the impact that a multi-use sports complex would have on our community and fully support the development of this type of facility. A new complex would generate a substantial amount of economic impact through state, regional, and national tournaments and events. The facility would also fulfill the needs of our community's youth sports clubs, including their leagues, practices, and other programming. Without an adequate facility, Bloomington Normal would not have a sufficient number of fields to host events and tournaments that would generate tourism and economic impact, let alone support the programming of the local sports organizations. Other cities in Illinois and the Midwest, including Rockford, Illinois, Westfield, Indiana, and others, have satisfied the need for championship quality athletic facilities in their communities and have seen significant economic benefits from those. That said, the Illinois Fire Juniors plans for a new sports complex here in Normal are very exciting, and the CVB and Sports Commission will be as helpful as possible in the development of this project. While the initial plans appear to be somewhat smaller than what Sports Facility Advisory called for in their 2018 feasibility study, the Illinois Fire Juniors Complex will meet the needs of the local sports programs and also allow for attracting visitors through tournament play in many different sports, not just soccer. The Illinois Fire Juniors have our full support, and we will be working with them to utilize this complex to its full potential, as it would ultimately enhance the region's economic vitality, sustainability, and quality of life. Thank you for your time and good evening.
Mayor, point of order, please.
Yes.
I missed the gentleman's name when he identified himself. Could I have the clerk please repeat that?
His name was Matt Hawkins.
Thank you.
Our next speaker.
Unmuted, Ms. Eves.
Good evening, Mayor, councilpersons. My name is Ginny Eves and I reside in Bloomington. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you tonight about the development of a 100-acre soccer complex in Normal. I'm a mom to a 9-year-old who plays soccer, and I'm also a member of the Illinois Fire Juniors Capital Campaign Committee, which raises funds for this effort. We're really excited about the opportunities that the IFJ family is bringing to Normal. Without a definitive plan for the new fields, this community would most likely lose soccer organizations and access due to the necessary retirement of the current community fields. And so as an organization and as parents, we did what we did to support our kids. We went to work. From a developmental standpoint, our local soccer organizations have taught our children teamwork, hard work, physical agility, and diversity of persons. It is my hope that those are tenets which we as a community fully support pouring into our young people. We've worked diligently to raise private funds and in-kind donations for this endeavor, and we will continue to do so in order to construct a facility which meets our local soccer community demands and needs. The genesis of this project is based on privately driven need and privately raised funds from soccer families like mine and from corporate sponsors who support this project. In addition to the personal vitality that we all see in our own children for participation in the sport, we also see many economic opportunities for the community. Each year, over 2,000 kids participate in our soccer program. Last year's tournament brought in 5,000 vehicles of people into our current facility with over 150 teams. EDC reports have previously analyzed a positive economic impact on the community with respect to this type of facility. Location and facilities is really not the only goal that we have as an organization. Coupled with this building project is a project equally important to us, and that's scholarship funding. We have an effort on and a focus on inclusion and on outreach because no child should be precluded from benefits of sport purely because of economics. With every request for building funds, there is another ask from our donors, and that is a donation to our scholarship fund. In addition, we have a top soccer program, which is a league for children with disabilities who otherwise would not be able to compete. As with the U.S. Youth Soccer Organization, these are efforts that we hold dear. Now imagine more fields for more teams and tournaments and actually for more sports. Soccer is not the only sport which can utilize these fields. Lacrosse and rugby are just a few additional sports that can utilize our field. The need in this community is very great. We sit here as a community very ideally at the intersection of several major highways with the ability to draw teams and sporting events, not just from our hometown, but from other states, Wisconsin, Indiana, Iowa, and Missouri. We come today asking for support from the community for this effort, and we thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment tonight. Our first item of business is the omnibus agenda items considered routine and will be taken with one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. I would remind council members to raise your hand and to unraise your hand when you're done speaking. It makes the flow much easier. Mr. Nord.
I would like to remove item B.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mayor, I need a motion in a second.
Oh, I'm sorry, motion.
So move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Please call the roll. Items approved, items on the omnibus agenda considered for approval are the minutes of the regular council meeting of June 15th, 2020, and approval of minutes of the public hearing of June 22nd, 2020, approval of the minutes of the special meeting of June 22nd, 2020. Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. Item B is a report to receive and file town of normal expenditures for payment as of July 1st, 2020. Mr. Nord.
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. First question is on the expense to pay Bloomington Normal Public Transit. The contribution this month is $4,350, which is significantly lower than what it typically is. Ms. Reese had given me a little bit of information as to why it was low, but I'd kind of like her to, for public education, explain to the public why it is.
Sure. In terms of why we made this $4,000 payment?
Yeah, because usually it's significantly higher.
Right. This particular payment, I don't know which page of the council packet is in, so I can't really reference that. But this particular $4,000 plus payment to Connect Transit was what we're calling kind of a makeup payment, because for the months of April and May, I believe, Connect Transit, when they invoiced us for our monthly support, they invoiced the town at the fiscal year 1920 rate rather than the fiscal year 2021 rate. So for April and May, which are the first 2 months of our fiscal year, Connect Transit had invoiced us at last fiscal year's rate. So in order to make up the difference on what the fiscal year 2021 rate is compared to fiscal year 1920, they had invoiced us about $4,000 plus too little. So this was a correction of the invoice.
And where was the increase from last fiscal year to this fiscal year? Where was that approved at? Or when was it approved?
Mr. Nord,
It was through the budget process. Sorry, Mayor.
Excuse me, Mr. Nord, we're not here to delve into that. You asked your question about the bill tonight and the question was answered. And I think you probably,
the question, is,
you're asking about prior items and we're not discussing that in bills. You could bring that up with Ms. Reese. You could bring it up with your fellow council members. You can bring it up in concerns. It is not appropriate on the receive and file. You asked a question about a bill. The question was answered.
I haven't even got to my question. I asked her if she would explain. Now I'm at my question.
Does your question apply to the $4,000 payment?
It does.
Then ask the question. I'm sorry.
Okay. The $4,000 payment. that increase in funding, is that something that was scheduled with a previous prior or with a prior council action?
When the council adopted the budget included that payment to Connect Transit. It's something we've done every year based on the Connect Transit budget.
So every year it goes up by a similar dollar amount.
I don't know if it's similar, but I would say every year Connect Transit invoices us what we've budgeted to pay them. I couldn't tell you if it goes up a specific percentage each year or not without looking. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, but the council didn't approve this. They just billed us more. Is that what I'm understanding?
Mr.
Council
North,
approved support in the budget.
it was budgeted.
Okay.
Next question, please.
The next question is in HR, there's an expense for a public relations director. I question not the expense, but the director position. Over half of our population
Mr.
has
Nord,
been gone for almost a year. Where's the funding going to come from for that?
I'm going to cut you off again. You're asking questions of policy. You can ask those questions and concerns. You can ask them of your fellow council members. It is not an appropriate questions under the report to receive and file bills.
Well, it's not a policy question. It's a question of where's the funding coming from for this?
Mr. Nord, you just said you did not approve of the hiring of a director. That is a policy issue.
Well, I don't approve of the expense because there's no funding to back it up.
The expense has been paid.
And that's my question.
The expense has been paid, so just note that you do not approve of the expense. Your next question.
All right. Well, all right. Then for the public record, I want to state that we will have a significant revenue shortage this year. And, we need to make decisions on how we're going to be funding all this spending.
Mr. Nord.
That's the end of my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Nord, I'm going to ask you to please quit asking policy questions during the report to receive and file bills. I've asked you before. I'm going to ask you again. Please quit doing that. Please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Coos?
Aye. The report to receive and file town normal expenditures is approved. We have a number of items of general orders. The first is a resolution authorizing annual support of the Small Business Development Center. Motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Mr. Nord, you've got your hand up. I don't know if that was from the last one or Mr. McCarthy, and then Mr. Nord.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just first I appreciate the report out that we got. It's always good to see every year the summary of the activity and what's going on, and that the increase in focus on small businesses and the expanded reach of this group, reaching down into high schools, reaching the colleges, connecting with very strongly through Chamber and other and EDC and other agencies with our business community, and to see the number of entrepreneurs that are being helped and small business owners being helped, work for minority businesses in our community. These are all expanded services than what's been done before. It's great to see them. And as a small business guy, I'm kind of focused on that kind of thing. And just, 64% of net new jobs, private sector jobs in the United States are from small businesses. And in small businesses in the United States, almost 80% of them are small 1 and 2 mom and pop shops, the kind of businesses that need help from someplace than like SBDC. So I think it's a great program. I'm happy to see all that they're being able to do and the expanded reach in our community and so forth.
Thank you. Mr. Nord.
Thank you.
Lower your hand, please.
All right.
I'm sorry.
And
Mr.
lowered. All right. My question is I would like to see the group present to us. I think it's important that taxpayers should hear what they're getting for their investment. And it's also important that the council hears what it is we can do beyond funding to help this group assist new businesses become successful and create jobs in our community. So we're missing that piece of the back and forth interaction. So we know what we can better do. And Ms. Reese had mentioned that Ms. Busson might be on the call. I don't really want to put her on the spot, but would it be possible for her to come in the near future and give us that information?
I think that's an appropriate request, Mr. Nord. And again, not putting her on the spot tonight, we're not going to ask her to give an overview of her program without giving her time to prepare on that.
Absolutely.
Mayor Coos and Councilmember Nord, I also would refer folks in our council packet. We have a lot of materials from SBDC on their 2019 annual report. I also want to refer people to their website, which is mcleancosbdc.org, and their Facebook page, which is IWUSBDC. So those are two resources that people can take a look, and there's a lot of information about that organization on online.
Okay, if Ms. Busson is on, would asking her to come back and say 3 months, would that give her enough time to prepare something?
Let's let staff work with Ms. Busson on that. But yes,
okay, then
we can bring her back in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then in that case, I'd like to make a proposal that the funding is contingent on coming in to give us that presentation.
I'm seeing some head shaking from my fellow council members. I don't think we're in a position to do that tonight.
Then I'd like to make the proposal that we just do the 1 year, so we do get a presentation instead of approving for 3 years. Because it's important for us as council members to understand what we can do beyond just giving funds, because there's a lot of things that keep businesses from coming here. And if we don't hear from the very people that are working with these businesses and they see them choose not to come to Normal and they go somewhere else, we are just not doing economic development the service that it needs.
I'll just have to say, Mr. Nord, I can pretty much disagree with everything you just said. There are a lot of people in this community that are working very hard to promote economic development in this community, and to make that assumption, I think it was unfounded.
Well, I think you misunderstood my assumption. My ask is that council members need to understand what those obstacles are, because they may be obstacles we can remove. And unless people tell us, we don't know.
Order here, Mayor. Point of order.
Mr. Nord, you're assuming that your fellow council members don't understand. Mr. McCarthy just gave a pretty good overview. Mr. McCarthy, your point of order.
Yeah, point of order. If there's a motion on the floor, let the motion go. If not, let's move on. We could go back and forth on opinions here, but either make a motion or don't.
Ms. Smith? I'll
Yes.
come back to you, Mr. Nord. Raise your hand.
Thank you. Ms. Busson, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, my last name is Busoni. Thank you.
Busoni. Okay. A little bit of Italian there?
Yes, my husband is. I'm German. Oh, yes.
I must say that the annual report that was included in the council packet was quite extensive and provided a lot of information in very user-friendly format. For clarification, is there any cost to businesses that contact you for services?
No, ma'am, there is not, because we are grant funded and we have a local match. We do not charge for our services as far as consultation. So how that generally works, people contact us that either want to start a business or have an existing small business that need help and support to continue to grow or create change. And then we consult with them through our knowledge, through our resources, and help them move forward with that change. Or we help entrepreneurs write a business plan so they can get a small business started. We have found that to be very successful in our center is to have a tremendous amount of focus on the business plan. That planning process is so important up front. And we've been very successful that way with our startups and our clients.
And I did see the report included a breakout between startups contacting you and existing businesses. You indicated in the report there's 2 staff and interns. Are the interns volunteers, or are they also paid and compensated for their service to the organization?
The interns are paid they are mostly paid by Illinois Wesleyan University. The SBDC pays for one. We have 4 interns per semester now. They market our center and they also assist clients that want help with new logo design, a new website options, maybe social media strategy. It's a great opportunity for senior level students to experience that type of project work. We are very much involved with those meetings with our students and the clients, but that's what our interns do, and they are very important to our center. And then there are 2 full-time employees in the center, myself and the assistant director, Angela Cooper-Smith.
And do the salaries for the interns, do those flow through those budget items? So the $11,000 per month?
If I could interject here, we just asked, we had a discussion about having her come back.
Okay.
Give an overview of the program, and I think it's fair to give her an opportunity to give a broader overreach of the program and not do it through Q&A, if you don't mind.
Well, if I could just ask one more question as to whether or not you're comfortable that the target audience for your services is getting the message that you are there for their needs.
Absolutely. We've seen a tremendous amount of growth. It's been exponential since we opened just a little over 3 years ago. They are getting our message. They're not only getting it through our website and through our social media, but through the Pantograph and also through WJBC. We have a monthly radio spot there.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to close with the importance for any organization to have stable funding. And in these times of uncertainty, that a 3-year commitment allows an organization to themselves make plans and make sure that they are available to that customer base that has become dependent on them. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, if you'd lower your hand, and Ms. Lorenz.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. I was listening to Mr. Nord's question a bit ago, and perhaps let me try to reframe it in a way that I think he was trying to ask. And this is a question for Ms. Usoni. The dollars going to fund your organization coming from some from the town, some from the city, and some from Wesleyan, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. How do you work in cooperation with the EDC, which is another entity that the town and the city of Bloomington also fund? And so another way to put that is, how can you assure us that the money that is being spent for similar efforts in the big picture of economic development, how can you assure us that the money that you are using in your agency is distinct and complementary to that of the EDC? How do you guys cooperate, compare, and contrast?
Well, first of all, I want to say the EDC is not funding the SBDC. The EDC is their objective, as it's always been explained to me, is to bring business here to McLean County. As the SBDC works with people that live here or established, or existing small businesses or entrepreneurs, they may be moving here with a spouse that takes a job, but the higher majority of our clients are already residents of McLean County. So our objective is not to bring small business from outside of McLean County to McLean County. That's more, as I understand it, of an EDC function, not necessarily small business. They're looking at all size, just small business. They're looking at all sizes. But how we work in conjunction is through our resources, not financial resources, but our resources that we both have. We collaborate a tremendous amount in addition to with the Chamber of Commerce. If there's any support that any of us can offer, I have 2 volunteers for the SBDC that approached us, one in November of 2017 and one in September of 2018, and they help us assist with client consultation. They're actually in the same room with us when we're doing this. Both my assistant director and I are not always there together, but we oftentimes have one of our volunteers with us. They helped the EDC most recently in the EDC wanting to contact every business in McLean County recently. They wanted to do that via telephone. So we offered that assistance from our center. But as far as financial means, my center, the financial means is spent on client consultation, salaries, benefits. Salaries and benefits are the majority of our expenses, of course. Okay. And that is not a part of the EDC. So there is not money being spent that the town is providing the SBDC, and I'm not receiving anything any longer from the EDC. So there's not any, I think what in the past was considered that we were getting funds from two entities, and one entity gives money to the other and then they're giving us money. That was in my mind, the EDC, it was their responsibility to separate that out, because I don't know where their funding comes from. They fundraise, and we don't fundraise. So our funding sources are even different as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. What I wanted to do with that question, and for the sake of my comment at this point, is I see a distinction between dollars that go, public dollars that go to fund the EDC, and public dollars that are being discussed now to go to fund your organization. And the similarity, thinking of it as a Venn diagram, you are both in the space of improving our economy, economic development, and That's the thing. And I'll go further to say that I'm really intrigued to hear how you're leveraging the special asset of our community, and that is our university town, and leveraging the students and giving them a rich experience. So that's great. So as a municipality, what we're doing here today is another piece of the portfolio of investment in economic development. This one where you have kind of your own space that you described, that is exclusive of what a typical economic development does. But at the same time, you're complementary. You're not working in vacuums from each other. So this is one piece of that portfolio. The other, of course, being economic development, and to some extent also the Chamber of Commerce workforce development. So I think it's important to understand that, and maybe Mr. Nord, that helps get at some of the questioning that you were getting at. My last question, if I can do one more, and this pivots to Ms. Reese. Could you refresh my memory on the increase that we're seeing here in this go round versus years past?
Sure. The requested funding is for a 3-year commitment from the town for $44,854 per year for 3 years, whereas the city of Bloomington will be contributing just over $62,000 per year for 3 years. That $44,800 request is about $24,000 more than we have been paying. The first 3 years of our commitment to SBDC was $20,000. Well, I should say the first year was just a partial year, so it was only $7,700. But year 2 and year 3, the first of our first 3-year commitment, were $20,854 per year. And I would suggest, kind of in tying with Mrs. Smith's comments, one of the reasons that SBDC has requested increased funding from both the city and the town and Illinois Wesleyan has been to support the addition of staff. And as I pointed out in the covered council report, in 2019 alone, SBDC consulted with almost 200 clients, and they have 2 full-time staff. And as Karen indicated, and then they're supplemented with interns. I think it would be putting SBDC in a difficult position to recruit employees if they only had 1-year commitment. That's a very difficult situation to be placed in, to recruit the highest quality individuals if they don't know if they'll have a job in a year. So I think that is part of the reason behind a 3-year commitment from all 3 entities, so that they can move forward with confidence that they will have funding to support additional staff.
Ms. Cummings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mrs. Bassoni, for sharing a little bit tonight. I just really wanted to speak on the fact of why this is important. I'm familiar with a business that has utilized SBDC and spoke highly of the assistance that they received in order to actually get their business started. And I first became familiar with the program, maybe 2 years ago. I think you guys had just got started and you did a small business fair on the west side of Bloomington. And it's those types of things that are very vital to our community, where you hosted for new startup businesses. They came out, they set up tables. There were different types of businesses, and you actually gave away a small little grant, kind of like check for that new startup business to go forward with. So, it's these types of things and these types of programs and these types of organizations that are vital to our community. It was a way, one, for you all to get yourselves out there to say, we're here, this is what we can offer to you, but also to showcase some of the local small businesses that people didn't know about. And a couple of them have grown since that particular fair. So it is very important that we get behind such a program and make the investment because we'll, I believe, as we have already, seen a great rate of return.
Thank you. Mr. Nord.
Thank you. And Ms. Bassoni, I'm sorry for botching your last name.
Oh, that's okay.
A question for you. Is there a mechanism for the SBDC to let whatever municipality or organization it is that your clients may find that they have a problem with, and they come back, they probably vent to you because you get to know your clients very, very, very well. And you learn about different struggles that people have that may not even be money related. Is there a mechanism for you to relay those challenges and obstacles onto whatever municipal body so they can try and address those, so that way it doesn't discourage someone else?
Yes, we have an advisory board from which Pam Reese is a part of, and also from Town of Normal, and Tim Gleason from the City of Bloomington. So if that were to be an agenda item that surfaces, that would be something that they would become aware of that may be respective to their municipality. If it happens to be from maybe a rural community, because we have a tremendous amount of presence in the rural sector as well of McLean County, one of the mayors would be contacted by me.
Okay, because I've talked to a lot of businesses, and there are some businesses that have chosen to go elsewhere, and unless we find out why they chose to go elsewhere, there's no lessons learned that has happened, and that's the mechanism that I'm hoping we can do by like some sort of regular interaction. And if it's with Ms. Reese as the on the advisory board, then I would just like that to be kind of like a set agenda item. So we're constantly getting feedback, because for every one person or every one business that goes elsewhere, there's probably a handful of others that you never heard about that did the same thing. And I just don't want to lose those people by repeating the same problems. So that's kind of where my request for you to come back is from, because I want to learn from your experiences and your interactions with the folks that are trying to start businesses, because it is so hard. It's not just about money. There's all the other stuff.
I would be more than happy to present specific details about the SBDC. I'm very transparent, and I'm happy to give you as much information and have as much discussion as your council would like.
Yeah. And whenever you do, it's the stories of why people left that I think are the more important ones, because then we know what to change. So
Stan, I'm not sure that I cannot address that though, because I don't deal with people that are leaving McLean County. We've not had, we've had one business that we have assisted with and startup in over 3 years that shut their doors. That was downtown Bloomington. And they chose not to follow our marketing protocol, what we recommend in marketing, but their prerogative. And unfortunately, their span of through the marketing channel of communication wasn't strong enough. And that is the only one that we know of that, and they didn't leave McLean County. I understand what you're saying. I just don't know that I'm the person that can answer those questions perhaps that you would have, because I don't, in my position and what we do in the center, we're not really dealing with people that or businesses that pick up and have left McLean County. Because if our clients, our existing clients that we have left or have no longer no longer have consultation with us, we know that. So I'm not sure I'm the person. I realize that is a problem, and I realize it needs to be discussed. I'm just not sure I'm the best person to discuss that.
Karen, if I could jump in and indicate, certainly you would share with me at an advisory board meeting or outside of an advisory board meeting if there was some sort of hurdle caused by the town of Normal preventing someone from starting their own business. But I think what Mr. Nord is referencing is, and I think we've discussed this in the past, that is actually a function of the Economic Development Council. The EDC has a component for business recruitment and retention. And so it's the retention side of the business that EDC focuses on. And if we don't retain the business and they go elsewhere, that falls under EDC's scope of responsibility.
Great, thank you.
Seeing no further requests to comment, please call the roll.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, the resolution is approved. Item 8 is a resolution to accept bids and award a contract to Stark Excavating Incorporated for the Normal Branch Sugar Creek Bank stabilization project. Excuse me, and that is in the amount of $630,505.
Move approval. Second.
Thank you. Is there discussion on this item? Ms. Smith and then Mr. Nord.
Thank you. I had a conversation earlier in the day after looking at the information included in the packet and asked about the length of this project distance-wise, and the cost is over $500,000. So I was wondering if someone can highlight what are some of the factors that lead to the expense of this project, because I noticed that there's $144,600 for one type of excavation, and then $110,000. There's several variables for stabilization. So what are some of the major items that make this an expensive project? Is there someone who can answer those questions in the room tonight?
Yes, Ms. Smith, there is. Am I muted? Ryan Otto, city engineer, is on the call. He can certainly explain the complexity of this project and even the length. This is a creek improvement project from College Avenue north to Blair Drive, and it is a pretty extensive project. So Mr. Otto, if you're on the call, can you jump in?
Yes, Ms. Reese, thank you. And thank you for your question, Ms. Smith. The project, as mentioned in the memo, involves removing a lot of the overgrowth brush, removing some of the erosion areas and repairing those, and then using a naturalized stabilization method in some areas, as well as some structural methods, including what we call a gabion basket. A gabion basket is a wire basket that we fill with rock, similar to what we used recently along Towanda Avenue and Vernon, that section of creek along the trail, which incidentally is being paved tomorrow. It's exciting news. But the main components of this project, to answer your question, are earth excavation. The stream bank in a lot of areas is very steep, making it unsafe and unpractical to mow in a lot of areas. And the inaccessibility of the channel. There's only two ways to access this, which is from Blair and from College Avenue, make it very difficult for town maintenance staff to get back in there. So one of the objectives of the project is to provide access for future maintenance. What future maintenance could look like in this case would be once the natural vegetation is established, it would be selective mowing, maybe some locally applied herbicides, as well as just frequent inspection to make sure that we maintain that section and don't have to do this again. The different pay items that you are seeing involve different steps for the contractor. There's the initial removal of unwanted sediment, and then there's the final grading. It's just all things we break out to allow the contractor to better prepare his bid based on a smaller section of the work.
Will residents experience any disruption on their properties as this work is being done?
They should not. We have talked with many of them. We had a public meeting prior to completing the design, and we're able to address several concerns that were expressed with the work. Most of the work will go on in what is essentially behind their property in their backyards. We don't plan to get on private property as part of this project. Most residents will see the work obviously in their backyard, but no, there shouldn't be any impact to their property.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. In the description, it talks about there's overgrowth, trees and brush. Is this from not mowing? Is that how that overbrush came about?
It's from lack of maintenance in general. The lack of, and I mentioned it before to Ms. Smith, is the inability to get equipment back to the site. Once that is able to be done, the town staff will have the ability to monitor and maintain and do selective mowing or herbicide applications or prescribed burns to maintain the section. So, so I guess to answer your question, yes, the fact that the areas have been sitting without without regular maintenance because of the lack of access make it very difficult to get the growth out of there. And because of the erosion that's occurring due to frequent mowing or residents mowing too far into the creek area, all that contributes to a lack of accessibility and the inability to maintain it effectively.
Okay. Just further upstream from this, there by Tawanda Avenue, there's a retired fireman that had contacted the town, it's been over a year ago, along that same section of creek, where the town has stopped mowing as part of some method for maintaining the creek. And everything was overgrown. And now we've been back there, I think it's Cardinal maybe, has been back there manually pulling out the overgrowth, the trees, the brushes. How did the decision come about for this to be completely reworked versus the same method that's happening upstream?
This section is an extension of the work completed by the town back in 2015 and 2016 through Anderson Park. That's a great example of what we hope to accomplish with this section. I think the result of the project turned out very good. Long-term maintenance should be minimal if we look at it and continue to monitor it and make sure we maintain it. The section that you're referring to, we would continue to monitor that for future work if it needed. I think Cardinal continues to do some work out there. The planned work, my understanding is that they plan to do some additional erosion control and vegetative control in that section in the near future.
Okay, and vegetative control, is that mowing?
It may not or may not include mowing. I don't know at this point. It will depend on accessibility for that section. Cardinal is certainly capable of looking at that with town staff and will help us continually monitor that section to take a look at that section for maintenance here in the near term, but also long term for future projects if needed.
Okay, good. Thank you, because the complaints for this one seem very, very similar. The only additional one was the folks upstream had complained about excessive mosquitoes from what it used to be whenever the town used to mow it. But thank you for the info.
You're welcome, sir.
Ms. Smith.
If you'll pardon me, I forgot to ask. I saw in the packet that it referenced that the funding for this came from the Stormwater Fund. Is that separate from the Water Enterprise Fund and a subset of the general fund?
Yes, the Stormwater Fund is its own enterprise fund. It's funded through our stormwater utility fee that's assessed to properties based on either parcel or impervious area for commercial areas.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Nord, Ms. Smith, you both still have your hands raised, or do you have further? Thank you. Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. Resolution is approved. Item 8 is a resolution authorizing the filing of the town's amended community development block grant citizen participation plan.
Move approval. Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item 10 is a resolution authorizing the filing of the Community Development Block Grant Programs revised 2020 and 2024 Consolidated Plan and Program Year 2020-2021 Action Plan.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Is there discussion on this item? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item 11, an ordinance adopting an amended policy prohibiting sexual harassment.
Move approval.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion on this item. Mr. Nord.
I say that this has taken nearly a year, which I understand government is slow, but through reading the policy, something we may need to consider is how we're going to address our 2-on-1 meetings, because there are no recordings there, and there's no way to prove or protect folks from any accusations. So I think it's important for everyone's protection that we consider how we're going to address it in a policy decision that's going to be long lasting, something that'll last long after we leave council. And I don't know the solution. I just wanted to point that out, that I think that's something that's missing that we really need to look at.
Point of order. I think that doesn't apply to this. This is more so from the policy based on our employees, or the employees, I should say, versus how we conduct as council members. The 2-on-1s would not apply necessarily within that policy. We would have to create a separate or go back and have further discussion on how we would want to move forward as we relate to one another. But this particular policy is as it relates to the employees. Am I correct, Ms.?
Actually, Ms. Cummings, this policy, the only change to this policy that's before council tonight pertains to council member claims of sexual harassment. So in the example provided by Mr. Nord, for the times when 2 council members might meet with me or with staff, for the 2-on-1s, I call them update meetings. I guess that if that's a concern, that would pertain to any meeting
Okay.
2 of you might have.
Got
So I don't know if there's anything that you want to do to amend this policy to reflect any time 2 of you might be meeting, but the change to the policy tonight specifically addresses the state mandated sexual harassment requirements from between elected officials.
With that note, if council members would like to take up Mr. Nord's request, please contact me or Ms. Reese, and we'll move forward based on your response. Further on this item? Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance is approved. Item 12 is an ordinance amending a special use permit for Journey Church and granting a variation concerning sign regulations at 1320 East College Avenue.
Move approval.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion on this item.
Mayor Kus, if I could jump in anticipation of any council questions and indicate that the motion before you tonight is in the affirmative. Author approving a variation. Staff, however, recommends denial, and the zoning board of appeals recommended denial. I just want council to understand that if you vote in the affirmative, it's to approve the variance.
Thank you. I was getting ready to say that, but we don't often encounter that So that's good to clear that up. Ms. Smith?
Yes, in reading over the information included with the packet, I saw the discussion of the fact that the organization currently has a fixed sign and are seeking a separate banner, as it were, to have permanent display on their property. And in recommending that it's be denied, the zoning commission pointed out that alternatives exist to accomplishing the same task with a modification to their more permanent sign. I have seen citizens ask the question about the town's policy of temporary signs should be only 84 days. And on a separate matter, how do we address complaints where in our neighborhoods we have some individuals that have personal statements in their yards when we're not recommending this permanent display of this banner for this church?
That sounds like a perfect question for Director of Building and Zoning Greg Trummel and also Brian Day, because we deal with that quite regularly with people making signs or posting things in their yard under First Amendment freedom of speech positions compared to temporary signs for businesses. So I believe Greg Trummel is on this call. And Greg, I'll let you and Brian Day jump in.
Thanks, Mrs. Reese. And again, Mrs. Smith, I'll try and answer your question as best I can. But yes, we do. And as part of a comprehensive amendment to our sign code back in 2002, our temporary sign restrictions used to be pretty restrictive and allowed for temporary displays 14 days in a calendar year. And so this was quite an expansion as we moved to 84 days. And the thought process there was to give business enterprises or churches or schools or anybody for that matter in any kind of a business capacity to do some special event type advertising, whether it's Coke is on sale this week or they're very, very popular at convenience stores and the like. So we did feel that was one of the options that was available to the church, is they could leave or actually make use of the temporary display for the 84 days in a year. And again, not to get too far into the weeds, but essentially that could be used up 84 days in a row, or they could use a week a month, or they could break it up however they wanted to. And so that was one option that we offered up as part of this conversation. So to the other question that you raised about, signs of I guess I'll call them public interest. I will ask Brian to help me out here a little bit, but we do have a few signs, and obviously we've had a few more erupt in the past couple of years for lots of different reasons. But those are I guess what I'll say, freedom of speech type issues, and our code does classify those as signs that are exempt from our requirements. It makes it a little tricky because it is confusing to the average citizen to say, well, this person has a sign in your yard talking about whatever the activity or event is, and then how come I can't do something similar in a business capacity? So if I didn't answer your questions, let me know and we can continue to elaborate.
No, I appreciate your clarification of the process taken in denying the request by this church, but I would appreciate Mr. Day differentiating why a similar enforcement isn't imposed on homeowners.
You're on mute, Mr.
Brian? Yeah, I was going to say we can't hear you, Brian, if you're trying.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Traditionally, under First Amendment standards, there's been a difference between businesses and private speech in the way that they're dealt with. Certainly in terms of the temporary, we don't see a lot of temporary signs that are up in public locations. The signs we tend to get in private residences are usually more permanent signs than what we would consider the temporary signs that we're dealing with here, which is just a banner strung up. But there is a lot of First Amendment issues regarding the differences between commercial and non-commercial speech.
And I would assume Mr. Day, you have a lot of case law that you can reference that we use to determine First Amendment rights.
We look at it all, and it's
residential neighborhood.
Constantly involving First Amendment laws, always changing, and we're constantly looking at the standards because it seems to change with every new court decision.
And as this is a church, are we treating it as a business in interpreting the requiring them to be subject to the normal town ordinance on signs? And we have some precedent set with consistency of other religious organizations that may have approached the town in the past?
Yes, in fact, the sign is, it's an institutional use. It's not a private speech issue.
Thank you.
Further discussion on this item? Please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Point of order here. Just to be clear, an aye vote is to approve the temporary sign. Is that correct?
That is correct.
We all clear on that?
Yes. So council, with approval, with a yes vote, council's approving Journey Church's request for this variance, this temporary sign variance.
If I
staff
could
recommended
give
Mr.
a further point of order. So there are certain variances that are allowed under our zoning code for signs. One is for the number of signs, and the other, they were asking for a variance from the temporary signs. The variances that are allowed under our zoning code are the number of signs, the size, and the setbacks. We don't currently have language in our code that would allow for a variance for the extension of the temporary signs. So if the council wanted to grant the temporary sign, that would require a text amendment to our zoning code to allow those types of variations, which would mean sending it to the Planning Commission. So if a yes vote just on this ordinance as it is allows them to have two signs rather than the one sign that they're currently allowed under code. But they couldn't, they'd have to make it a permanent sign. They couldn't have it as a temporary sign.
Mr. Day, is it appropriate to restart the vote based on that? And we're going back to discussion. Is it appropriate for me to back out of that vote? We've had 2 aye votes. Is that correct, Ms. Honka?
we have had 3.
3 of aye votes.
No, because you started with Ms. Cummings. And
I started to circle you, but I stopped. Okay, so we have 2.5-ish, but 2 officially.
And either of the members who voted aye can correct their vote for the record if they want to vote in a different way.
I just want to ask a question about the procedures here. So to agree with the Planning Commission, we vote no.
Correct.
Zoning, sorry, not planning, zoning, sorry. Okay, just want to make sure I'm understanding if we want to follow the zoning recommendation, zoning board recommendation.
Ms. Cummings?
Also, I think, okay, so as I think I've confused myself between what I thought, what I heard.
Let's not get back into the discussion on the signs, though. I'm going to caution on that. We're at a point of voting here, so if it's in clarification of the vote.
Well, I guess it was kind of clarification on something that Mr. Day said, but that's okay. I'll figure it out.
No, go ahead and ask your question if it's to Mr. Day.
Yeah, because he mentioned that the vote was not for the temporary signs, but for the permanent which we would have to then do an adjustment to the zoning code. Did I hear that correctly?
A yes vote on this would give them a variation to have 2 signs rather than the one that they're currently allowed. That sign would have to be a permanent sign, not a temporary sign, like the one they've currently got. So they'd have to create a permanent sign rather than the temporary. If the council wants to change the process for how long temporary signs can be displayed or to allow a variance for that, then we would need a motion to institute a text amendment through the Planning Commission.
But to be clear, staff is not recommending that. That would be the next step if council wants to move forward and permit variances for temporary signs.
And Greg may be wanting to say this too, but the method in which that sign has been put up is just, it is not a permanent sign. It's just 3 posts and temporary banners that get affixed every few days. So if a second sign were there, it would need to be built as a permanent sign, not what is there now.
Ms. Honker, would you review the first 2 votes, and if council members are firm with their vote, please just announce that.
I have Ms. Cummings as an affirmative vote and Mr. Nord as an affirmative vote.
Ms. Cummings, is that?
I will do a correction. Now having that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Day, for a no.
Mr. Nord.
I am somewhat confused. What is it the church wants? Which is it, like, which vote is going to go in agreement with what the church is requesting?
A yes vote is what
Okay,
the church is seeking. Well,
then
staff and
then I
zoning
vote
board is
yes.
recommending denial.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Honker, continue with the roll call, please.
Ms. Smith.
Mine is a no, Angie.
Thank you. Mrs. Loren.
No.
Mr. Preston.
No.
Mr. McCarthy.
No.
Mayor Kuth.
No. The ordinance is not approved. We have 3 items of new business tonight. The first is a presentation by Illinois Fire Juniors Soccer Club.
Yes,
Ms. Bruce,
thank you. Thank you, Mayor Kuth. Yes, I'm thrilled to invite Illinois Fire Juniors representatives, the president, Tim Cook, and Jeremy Kelly, who I believe serves as secretary and co-chair of the Capital Campaign for Illinois Fire Juniors. They are participating in your meeting this evening to share their exciting news about a project that they've been working very hard for the last couple of years and have recently announced publicly their plans. And so the floor is for Mr. Cook and Mr. Kelly to share their story with council.
Yeah, good evening, thank you. And Jeremy, I'll first help you out. You're sideways. Okay, if you want to fix your camera there. So thank you for inviting us to tonight to present, and I appreciate the time. So I'm going to try to share my screen just to have a couple slides. Hope this works. We shall see. All right. Can you guys see a title slide?
Yes, we can.
All right, awesome. So we're here, and as Pam said, we're here to announce what we announced to our club about a week and a half ago, that we're excited and ready to begin work on our future home replacing community fields. So we're here. We know we have another step to take as far as the Planning Commission goes and bringing the project to the Planning Commission, but we are ready for phase 1, and this is really the first step with allowing us to come to an agreement with the landowner and the town and allow us to invest more money in this project and prepare for the Planning Commission. So just a little background for everybody on where we were at and kind of where we've been. So we've been involved, as Pam said, for about 2 years, working on a parallel path with the town of Normal, with the city of Bloomington, and with the Convention and Visitors Bureau on exploring what it would look like to do a multi-sport complex here in Bloomington Normal. And so we've been very transparent along the way that with our lease ending at the earliest the end of this year and at the latest at the end of 2020, I got to do that, 2022, we were working our own parallel path so that we weren't left without a place to call home when our lease runs out that we have with the now I'm drawing a blank, but with the airport authority on that perspective. So as things didn't progress as we had hoped, we kept along our parallel path, and we're at where we are today. And I just want to give a thank you on our end to Pam Reese, Tim Gleason from the from the city of Bloomington, and Matt Hawkins from the Convention and Visitor Bureau, who have helped us along the way to get to this point. And so with that, after looking at a lot of properties and a lot of options, based on the access to the property, the size and the cost of what it would take to redevelop, we have an agreement in place to acquire land in North Normal that will allow us to build a complex that would allow for 10 full-size fields and 7 smaller fields, a stadium field, and an indoor facility potentially, all done in a phased approach. And we're really ready for phase 1, and I'll just move on. Phase 1 is really, how do we replace community fields and continue to allow us to operate in a single location and fulfill the need that will be lost when community fields go away. From that perspective, like I said, we're very excited to work with the town of Normal. We're very excited to get going, and I'm going to pass it over to Jeremy to talk a little more on his end.
Thanks. Hopefully everybody can hear me, and I'm right side up instead of sideways this time. But like Tim said, I'm beyond excited to be here. Happy to finally be able to speak about this publicly. And like he said, since we had our announcement last Wednesday, we've had just overwhelming positive feedback coming to us about this program, or about this location and this project. Mainly the positives have been along the lines of they love the location, that it's very close to where they live, or the access is great off the road. People are happy it's finally moving forward. We've heard a lot of comments about that because, as you know, there's been over the last 10 years many different groups that have looked at a solution or thought of land, site, etc. But this is really the first time the soccer club is coming forward and saying, hey, here's where we want to be in the future. And then we're hearing positives, obviously, that the private sector is stepping up and getting this going. No, that was a concern for a lot of people, and everybody saw the big price tag for the SFA side. So we're trying to move along and get this going as best we can here. Now, in the spirit of transparency, we have heard a few concerns and comments. I'm guessing some of you have as well. And I wanted to kind of bring those up and also play a little bit of Mythbusters here and address a few of those. First one is largely around roads. And these have run the gamut over the last couple of days of what road work's going to be needed. I was asked if this project would include some sort of flyover ramp to go back onto Veterans Parkway, and it doesn't. That's not in our budget or not in our wheelhouse at all. But some questions around road work, and largely our answer on that has been what we've said publicly and privately is we're going to let government be government. The road work and the pieces that are there, there's certain pieces that we would have to take care of, and there's other work that I know is like Towanda Avenue, for example. Not trying to steal anybody's thunder here, but I know that there's been a lot of work that's gone into that to widen it in different parts, put in fire hydrants and stuff well before this project came along. So as far as the road work we're looking at, we know that there will be some improvements that we'll have to pay for pieces. We factored that in to where we're at, but I can't speak for any of the like connection to Veterans Parkway or any of those sort of ideas. We have heard a couple concerns from people asking, more asking, not as much concerns about traffic. And I wanted to publicly say we've designed this intentionally to try to have a good traffic flow down there. We've designed it with that in mind. So we envision most of the people from outside the community will be coming in off the interstate, off of Veterans, taking that exit ramp right down by Shelbourne on the 66. And then we would have a one-way road coming in there to get people into the complex. Then past that, the dispersal, as they're leaving, people would be able to go back down Towanda and go up Route 66 and head back up north if they wanted to catch the interstate. They could also take Rab Road across and connect into Main Street if they're heading towards Peoria or Springfield. And then we know that people can drive south, go to Uptown Normal, go to some of the businesses, restaurants, hotels that are just a mile or two away from the site. So we know that the traffic pattern won't be as packed up as many might be concerned. And specifically, we've heard some people in Ironwood say, are there going to be people driving north and going through Ironwood? And realistically, with the other access points, that's not going to be a probable path and probably a low desirable path, as 66 is going to be clearly a better path where people would go to their restaurants or hotels or whatnot. And then the final concern that I'll say is we've had some people ask questions about, was there some backroom dealing, or was there a Normal versus Bloomington back and forth? And I can assure council that it's been absolutely nothing like that. As Tim said, we were on parallel paths the entire time, and the teamwork that was displayed between both city and town. We looked at sites in both places. We were at the end, as I said to a couple people, we've been city and town agnostic. We were trying to get the right site. This is the right site, and everybody understands that this is a greater community and this is a greater community good. So outside of those concerns, we've heard many more positives. We're just trying to push along and keep this positive pace going. But we know that we're going to need help from the community, from the business community, others out there in order to get this to the finish line. So we've had multiple groups approach us and talk about different aspects like the indoor facility. We'd certainly welcome those conversations. But you'll notice that we don't have an ask from this body for funding. And I guess I'll kind of close by saying we do have three asks of the body that we want to approach. One's we've made great progress thanks to multiple people jumping on board, seeing this vision, and we'd ask the council to join us in publicly supporting this project and recognize the good that this is going to do for the community. And next, we ask that council and staff continue helping us work through this process, get through the red tape, get this to the finish line as quick and inexpensively as we can. And then finally, if you hear of any concerns or questions or ideas from citizens to help this out, please send them our way. And we've already actually had one where in the design of this project, somebody had mentioned, wouldn't it be great if we could connect Constitution Trail from Rab Road down to Route 66? And this property could be a spot to do that, run it past the lake where we have to put the retention basin in. And we're open to those sort of conversations and actually embrace them. So if people have good ideas like that, if staff, council, know that we are thinking about this as the greater community. And that's what I guess I'll end on, that we know this isn't just about soccer, like we said the other day. This is more than our kids, more than our club. Tim and I are both longtime residents, born and raised here in the town, deep roots. This is about community. There can be great economic impact from this, and we can get things right if we do this right. So we just asked the council to join us. We think this is a great project. We're hearing that from the community, and we're excited to get going and hope that you guys are as excited as we are to get this to the finish line. And with that, I'd say and if there's any questions, we're ready to take them.
Thank you, Jeremy. I have got hands raised. Kim, thank you. First question from Karen Smith.
Thank you. I have a few questions. I know I've seen the numbers for the amount of donations that you're seeking. What kind of in-kind donations are you also pursuing to assist you in constructing these fields?
Well, I can take that one if you want, Tim. We know that certainly there's going to be pieces and parts of this, and when we're constructing it, that we're going to have to go out and bid out, or earthwork comes to mind as a for example. But we also know that there's certain items or certain ways that we've had businesses say, hey, we could possibly donate some time or donate some materials or effort. And one that comes to mind, we had in-kind donation for a bunch of lights. So that's money that we wouldn't have to spend there. I was talking to somebody today about light poles, fencing, those sort of items. So it's going to be kind of a hand in hand, if that makes sense. You can't really, I mean, unless somebody wants to come out and donate $1 million of dirt work, which we take, by the way, but you can't do that. But some of the other pieces, benches, some of the concession stand items, things like that.
And in the multi-sports complex, that proposal called for play area for lacrosse and cricket, to name some less common sports. Would those sports be able to use the soccer fields, or is there something we're not seeing on this original planning document?
So I'll take that one, Jeremy. So, so in general, I'll start with lacrosse. Lacrosse and football generally play on about the same footprint as soccer. So from that standpoint, we've got 10 full-size soccer fields, and we think these are full-size, like professional soccer fields, not small. They are sized to have that level. So they would support football. Rugby plays on that same footprint as well as lacrosse. And then on the drawing I have up now, there's one up here that shows a circle in the top left corner that says multi-use field. So that's showing what a full-size cricket space would look like if you would use, because each one of these 4 tops of fields are a full, they're turfed or grassed across all of it, so that it's all playable space. So you could have all 4 of those fields being used for cricket if that was a need and we had community need for that.
Well, I remember in speaking to the Parks and Rec department that we do have residents who come from other countries where cricket is popular, and they're currently using a site where the ball goes into water when someone is vigorous. And so I'm sure this would be something they'd be welcome, which brings up the next point. So how will your fields be made accessible to persons who are not members of your soccer organization?
So I think from that standpoint, the management of the fields, I don't know that we're far enough along, but we will be open, right, to them being used by anybody who's willing to rent them, right? In the end, we are a charitable organization, but we do have to make money to keep them operating, right? We're not here to say that we believe that this is going to be a profitable endeavor, but we do want to make enough money on the use of the fields that we can continue to improve them and keep the capital there to invest on keeping the fields there. So when we're not using them for soccer purposes, which is a lot of the time, we will be open to any other group, renting and using those fields as appropriate.
And we hope that we've signaled that by even just the thinking and the design and some of these other pieces, that we want to be a good community partner and have options and availability. That's why we designed some of the stuff we designed this way, so that others could use it.
And my final question, what is the rationale behind the retention pond? Why is that needed on the site? And is that addressing problems this acreage has already created in the surrounding properties?
Ms. Reese, I think you should take that one.
So it looks like Jeremy was ready to field that as well. We've had a number of conversations with Jeremy and Tim and their design team. The retention pond that shows on their concept plan is a regional basin, and it's a stormwater management program that's going to serve stormwater from that entire area, not just this particular site, but the area north of RAB, northwest of them. So it's a regional detention basin that the town has been planning on for probably at least 10 years or so to construct in that area. So this happens to be the low spot that will collect the stormwater from the entire region. And it is required to be in that location.
That is all I had. Thank you.
Ms. Reese, and that will be a wet bottom retention basin, is that correct? Oh, you're on mute.
I believe Mr. Kelly even referred to it as the lake. So yes, it will be a wet bottom basin.
Thank you. Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick ones. One, actually, Ms. Smith asked my shared use questions already. But it's good to see your thoughts for community shared use already flowing down to the design level of your drawings here, is that you're thinking that much about how to make it available for everybody in the community. And while your cricket example and the flow, and even thinking about the Constitution Trail, I think that's wonderful to see that. My only other question was, can you give us a sense of timing of when this starts, when you would foresee seeing the fields up and operational and in use? Or do you even have that idea yet?
I'll take that one, Tim. That's been probably the number one question from all of our members, as you'd expect. And my answer on that has been, well, it depends on how much money we're able to raise here and how quickly. Obviously, being public now, one of the hurdles we were running up against before was we would talk about this project to prospective donors and businesses, and they'd say, "Is this really happening? We've heard about this for a while," and so now we've already started to see some positive momentum on the fundraising side, but the fundraising is going to drive that, and we've been trying to be very transparent on that up front. We have to go through planning commission still, but one of our challenges has been we can't go into planning commission and say, this is the final project, we're going to do all turf, we're going to, because we don't know if we have enough money to do that, right? And for those that aren't that aware in this world, turf is a factor of 4 or 5 times the cost of grass. But grass takes 1.5 years to grow because you need to go through 2 growing seasons. Whereas we've had contractors look at the turf side and it could be up in 3 to 4 months if it was turf. So it's a balance. We think that we will have some turf here. We think we'll have some grass, but the infrastructure work will be the first work that we do, digging the retention pond, putting in the sewer line that we need, putting in the water pieces, and I don't want to get ahead of things. We have to go through the planning commission, but I envision kind of a 2-step approach where one, we say, this is the basics we want to do with phase 1. We want to get started. That might mean we get in there starting in the fall. And then the money will drive how quick the rest of that goes.
Thank you.
Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. Excuse me. I would would like to start out just by saying congratulations to Illinois Fire Juniors. I know this conversation has been a long time coming for you. It has been part of a larger conversation, of course, throughout the community that has also been a long time coming, and seeing you guys finally be able to break through with a land and a specific plan that can be acted upon is quite a major hurdle in getting to the point where your facility is open and people are out utilizing those fields and coming in from out of town to be able to do so. So congratulations on that. I have just one question for Fire Juniors and then one for staff. For Illinois Fire Juniors, will you guys actually be the owners of the land and the facility itself, or will that be a different entity, not part of the Illinois Fire Juniors organization that could down the road subject subject the current plan to change because it's not within your control.
Jeremy, you want me to take that one? So at this point in time, this is an agreement and a land transfer that will happen with Illinois Fire Juniors. Illinois Fire Juniors will maintain control of the property and the development of that property. And while we don't, we would entertain talking to partners that would help develop that land further. At this point, we do not intend to bring in a third party or another party that would own and operate this land on our behalf, or to do anything different beyond us owning and controlling the site.
And Mr. Preston, just to expand on that a touch. So an example there could be, like I had mentioned in my remarks, we've had some people approach us about the indoor building space as an example, that a business might want to run that, use that, whatever. If we were to say, yes, we'll partner with a group and they'll do that because that would get us that much closer and quicker to it, we'd look at that, but it's not our intent. Like Tim said, it's not our intent to pass this off to anybody. It's going to stay in-house in family, and Fire would own it.
Yeah, great. And even as part of your press release highlighting that the capital campaign aims to bring private financial support to this community-wide asset. Obviously, there have been many instances where there's been a public support ask as part of these presentations, and I would extend kudos to you guys. Thank you for really grinding it out with the private fundraising efforts. Just a question for staff then. I assume, though it has not been explicitly said, that this project and this proposal really is, at this point, seems to be taking the place of, and I guess being the entirety of whatever conversation existed from when we had SFA come. Meaning, with this moving forward, there are no other conversations about any other facility that are currently active. Is that right?
That is accurate, Mr. Preston.
All right. Thank you.
Can I weigh in on that just a little bit, Mr. Preston? And from day one, and I think a lot of times this conversation got lost. There was talk about the public-private partnerships and the public being involved. And it has been steadfastly stated that it cannot be a municipal facility. The wherewithal to purchase the land and build a facility like this is out of the capacity of the town of Normal, and also out of the capacity of a joint venture with the city of Bloomington in the town of Normal. So to be very, very clear, it was always envisioned to be some kind of project like this, maybe a public-private partnership, but now what we have is a public or a private entity taking this project on.
Yeah. Oh, I know we wouldn't be able to afford it, and I'm just glad that their efforts are right in line with that thought. Thanks.
Thank you. So, Mr. McCarthy and Mr. Preston, if you lower your hands, and Mr. Nord, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. This was a nice presentation. I'm glad you brought it in for us, and congratulations. I just recently learned that there's going to be some taxpayer support for this. So something that, well, I have a couple of questions relating to that. So the retention pond, since this is a regional retention pond, is this something that the town is going to be paying for the construction and maintenance of? Or is this something that your group is going to construct and then give over to the town like a normal development retention pond would follow?
I might need to defer to the engineers and on that with the second half of what you said, but no, it's been our understanding the entire time that it's on us. We have to build it and do it, and that helps a lot of the other properties in the area. Plus, there's kind of a floodplain that goes through here, so we have to control the water anyway. So it's both helping us, but then it's being a good neighbor to the area and around there. But it's been on us the entire time for that. Ms. Reese, did I say anything wrong?
That is accurate.
Or inaccurate? Okay.
We do. That is accurate. the town actually budgeted for many years. We budgeted to construct this detention basin, but then no development occurred. I believe we took that out of our budget somewhere around 2017, perhaps, maybe 2018. But in conversations with Illinois Fire Juniors, they are planning to construct the basin. As we move forward in terms of ongoing maintenance of the basin, we can address that when we come back with an annexation agreement in terms of ongoing maintenance and in what will be the public responsibility, if any, or if that will continue to be Illinois Fire Juniors. That will yet to be determined.
This is probably for staff. That retention basin, is that going to open up property further uphill that was a retention basin that, you know, will now turn into some sort of tax generating property?
That certainly is possible. I believe that is probably a developer's plan. There is a temporary detention basin to the northwest of this site, and it's been in place for many years because it's been it's deemed temporary, because when this regional detention basin is built, it will replace the temporary basin to the northwest of this site. So yes, I believe that the developer from the northwest area, the Shirk development, is looking forward to getting rid of their temporary basin and being able to develop on that site.
Okay. And then it sounds like the taxpayer is going to be asked to pay for some road and other infrastructure upgrades. I would ask that the town evaluate the total costs, you know, and maybe do some sort of traffic study, and let the council know ahead of time what we're looking at. And also for this group, I think for them, they should know this ahead of time too, because it all should be very transparent as to what type of taxpayer subsidy it's going to take, whether it's infrastructure or actually on the field, to make this happen, because we should know this before any commitments are made.
We certainly will, Mr. Nord. What you're referring to is the area of Towanda Avenue between Shelbourne Drive and Rab Road, and staff has been looking at potential lane addition to increase capacity of the area of Towanda Avenue. And so certainly we will keep council apprised of what it would cost to add a lane or improve that section of Towanda Avenue.
Yeah, and it may even go down as far as Towanda and Rab Road, because that area gets backed up already just with the houses that are there. And there's a lot of traffic that comes into this field. So we should just all go into this with our eyes open. Mm-hmm. Another question was the rent of the fields. I'm not sure if the park district, like my kids have been in soccer and we've played out at the field by the airport. I don't know if that was rented or how that works. It was not with fire. You know, these were just like peewee soccer. Is that something that you're counting on that money or that rental? I don't know if the town even rented it or how that worked, but is that group going to be able to play out here? And are they going to be charged rent?
Yeah, so Mr. Nord, I'll take that. And first, the two groups that you speak of, one is Prairie City Soccer's League, which is PCSL, and then Illinois Fire Juniors. We actually are a single entity operating under Illinois Fire Juniors. So we have both the recreational program that has been typically identified with playing out at the airport and owns the lease with Sierra. And yes, that group will be playing at this facility as well. So this facility would serve about, just with our group, about 2,000 youth and families from the area.
Okay. Let's see, sorry, I've got my notes kind of all over. Yeah, because the calls that I had, and I shared these with Mr. Kelly before, is people are thinking that this is the $43 million sports complex that's now coming about, and they're comparing it to the Coliseum. You know, it started off as a good idea, and then it turned into taxpayers paying for it. So I'm glad this is more private than what that is. So that part I'm glad for. It's just the infrastructure piece that I have some concerns about because, really this is a community-wide field. People from Bloomington will be using it, people from Normal, people from all over. And, I did have discussions with folks in Bloomington and, they had said that there was another location that already had this infrastructure available. And, it's the total taxpayer cost that I'm looking at, whether it's Bloomington taxpayers or Normal taxpayers. And I just want that to be out in the open, that was another location, which I believe it was, well, this is all private, so I don't need to bring that up. But whenever the taxpayers get involved, then it goes from things being kept private to, now it's out in the public. But thank you. Congratulations. And I look forward to it being very, very successful and minimal taxpayer impact. Thank you.
Ms. Lorenz.
Thank you. Jeremy and Tim know that I have this, but this is an old, about circa 2007 proposal for a championship soccer complex. It has the old Mitsubishi Motors of North America logo on it. This goes back to when that property was being looked at as a potential site. So, this during some pandemic house cleaning that I was doing, I uncovered this. I promised to give it to their archives as just a way of me saying congratulations to them for doing what many clubs and previous soccer club boards have tried to do, but through your perseverance and leadership, and also very important step up from the private sector has finally come together. And I think this is really obviously a very good thing for the kids of our community to give them a quality surface to play on. I was reminiscing with my daughter a little bit ago about this. She's 22, almost 23 now. She started out at the Nordfields with CIS, PCSL before that. So she's logged a lot of hours and miles on some fields, including community fields, that in looking back on it, she said, they're very good fields. So they're old fields and it's time for an upgrade. And so I think the kids of this community from a recreational and safety point of view will really benefit. And then to kind of bring it full circle to an earlier discussion we had tonight, and that is more from a business perspective, this is economic development really falling into our lap. This is a better site and a better venue for you to be able to do even better tournaments, and that brings people to our community who will dine in our restaurants and fill up at the gas station in town and fill up hotel rooms. And I think we can all agree that, especially in our COVID state and hopefully soon to be post-COVID state, all of those entities need a little boost right now. So this comes at a very, very good time and opportune time to bring some revenue and development to our community, both Bloomington, Normal, and McLean County. So kudos, you guys, and best wishes to you.
Jeremy and Tim, I think it's been said, but it's an incredible project for the community as a whole, not just for Normal. This will have a regional impact and bring a lot, as Ms. Lorenz said, a lot of economic development to the community, but it also gives a very, very strong and vital place for our youth in the community to have a place that is first class, first rate for them to play on and have their soccer tournaments on, and lacrosse and football and rugby and cricket all now have a place of high quality that looks to be developed by you. And I understand that you've got a lot of work to do going ahead, and as we can help you, just know we're there with you on this. We see the benefit of this to the larger community. We see the benefit of this to the town of Normal. We see the benefit of this to the youth of our regional area. So good luck, and we're right there with you to help. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take a point of personal privilege.
Sure. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Lorenz had mentioned Nordfields and being old and outdated. I just wanted to make sure that the community was aware. Those fields have all been recently redone. They've just added lights. They invited the council from both Bloomington and Normal last year to show us what they were doing. And this has all been funded 100% by the members and by business support. And, you know, if you haven't been out there for a while, you know, you should go out there because they are doing great things, zero taxpayer dollars. And, you know, it is a very nice field.
Thank you. Ms. Lorenz, can we just pause on that one? And did you have something for Tim and Jeremy?
I just was not referencing that the Nordfields were old. That's all. I wanted to make a correction.
Thank you. Tim, Jeremy, thank you for the presentation. And best of luck again. We're with you on this one.
Thank
Good
you.
luck. Thank you all.
Item 14, new business, is a presentation by Connect Transit.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor, Council.
Mayor Coos, I think Isaac, are you on the phone?
I'm
okay, there he is. All right. Mayor and Council, we have General Manager Isaac Thorne and Board Vice Chair, I believe, Julie Heil on the call as well. And Isaac is going to fill us in on some information about Connect Transit. They're going to share the summary of the Connect to the Future work groups efforts, and then give us an update on budget and kind of COVID impact. So thank you, Isaac and Julie.
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, thank you for allowing us to present tonight. With me, I do have joining me, Town Normal appointee and Connect Transit Board Trustee Julie Heil. So thank you. I am going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Hopefully everybody can see that.
No.
Isaac.
Oh, there we go.
Not here. Oh, now we get it.
Yes, now we have it.
Okay, so again, thank you for letting us present. Let's see. All right, so first of all, I just want to thank all of our Connect Transit employees for the extraordinary work they're doing during the pandemic. They've done a great job. The service that we're providing proves beyond a doubt that Connect Transit is an essential service that we're serving our community. Our community is relying on transit more than ever. Not everyone uses public transit, but they rely on essential employees such as grocery clerks, medical staff, and others that do rely on Connect Transit for transportation. So all these essential employees are important to Connect Transit, and they're critical to our community. Julie, did you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Isaac. I just wanted to redouble the public acknowledgement of our Connect Transit employees on behalf of the Board of Trustees. We have watched them with great admiration and appreciation as they have continued to keep this important artery for our community moving during difficult times. We consider our Connect Transit employees heroes, along with other essential workers throughout the community. And I would just ask that as council is in and around the community, as you see our employees out and about and have any opportunity to acknowledge their good work, we would ask you that you would do so from an appropriate distance.
Thank you. So when the coronavirus hit our community, we instituted policies and procedures to keep our employees and customers safe. We did reduce service we saw a drastic decrease in ridership, and we encourage riders to make only essential trips on public transit. This allowed for our employees to take time off of work. We've been encouraging our employees since this hit our community to stay home if you're sick. We don't want you obviously operating a vehicle or getting our customers sick or getting our employees sick. So that gave them time to take time off of work to care for family members or themselves. This also allowed us to put our operators to work in cleaning our buses and disinfecting our buses. They have done a tremendous job. We are cleaning and disinfecting buses every 4 hours and have been since mid-March. This did, though, add additional $6,000 in cleaning costs per week due to the labor and materials we're using. But it is absolutely essential that our buses are cleaned and disinfected to prevent customers and employees getting sick. The other measure we instituted was a passenger limit. We limited passengers to 10 or fewer on fixed route and 3 on Connect Mobility. We wanted to ensure that all of our customers were practicing safe physical distancing from one another. We also implemented a rear door boarding policy. We wanted to prevent passengers from passing by our drivers because we do not have a driver barrier on the front of the buses near the driver is at. We also instituted, we suspended the fare collection, and that allowed us to do rear door boarding. So even though we're encouraging customers to enter through the rear doors, those that do have mobility issues can still use the front door where the mobility lift or wheelchair ramp is at. But when we stopped collecting fares, we wanted to prevent customers from bunching up near the driver. We wanted to practice safe social distancing. Another item we also added was face and mask coverings. It's required on all of our buses. Our drivers are equipped with additional masks to provide to customers in case those customers don't have one. We do not want to leave our customers stranded. Additionally, we're installing interior displays and mobile ticketing to complement wayfinding and hands-free riding. And I'll be talking about more of that a little bit later. And lastly, more of a public service announcement, let council members know we are providing bus service to the COVID-19 testing center. We are partnered with Plain County Health Department and Plain County EMA to ensure that those that don't own a car, we get the bus service out to the testing site to ensure they can walk up and get tested. So I just want to make you aware of that and help us promote that. This time I'll turn it over to Trustee Julie Heil to talk about the Connect to Future Work Group recommendations.
I know that Isaac has provided you all with what amounts to a resend of the document we have provided you on at least 2 occasions between today and around February of this year. And we are respectful of your time. We know you can read. We've been through these recommendations from the Connect to the Future work group with you individually or in pairs and on multiple occasions since they were approved early this year. So what I just want to do is point you to that document one more time, let you know that we're happy to take whatever additional questions you have about those recommendations. But I would just remind you, we have basically the one rate for all pricing structure. We've got an expansion of a Connect Mobility service to the town and city limits. The Better Bus Stop campaign continues and has been underway, as you know, for the last couple of years. We are slated for complete bus stop provision by the end of year 2020. We are requesting sustainable funding from the town of Normal, $100,000 in this calendar year with an additional $100,000 added to that and made permanent the year after that, for a total of additional $200,000 long term. And that those numbers at the $250,000 level for the city of Bloomington. The city of Bloomington is already underway in following through on their decision to go ahead with that funding, and we are most grateful to them for doing so. And we have laid out future actions for some additional funding, which help us in a data-driven process, sort of a very carefully processed, defined way to expand service, contract service, make additional changes over time, longer term.
Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
So as she stated, we did talk to most council members about the work group recommendations in March. So I will talk about a little bit about our original plan prior to COVID-19. We originally planned to use the investment of $28,946 for the one rate for all and CM service expansion, and then $20,000 for the zero fare green route pilot. However, the zero fare green route pilot was removed due to the pandemic. The board did not believe now was the right time to test a zero fare pilot during a pandemic. So the remaining investment would have been used to decrease the federal funds used in our operating budget. So now for the revised investment allocation, Connect Transit would apply $225,000 to the one rate for all fare structure and $25,000 for the CM expansion to provide service to the city and town limits. Much like the town of Normal, Connect is facing unprecedented situation caused by the pandemic, and our previous ridership and fare revenue projections are obsolete due to the pandemic. We don't know when ridership will return to pre-COVID levels, and this will affect our fare revenue collected. We have shifted the town and city investment to ensure that fares remain equitable and affordable and bus service continues without disruption, which is very important. At this time, we remain cautious but optimistic regarding state funding, which reimburses Connect 65% of our operating expenses. And I will talk much more about our budget challenges in the next slide. So Connect is restoring service, or full service, in August. We're restoring service because ridership decreased 75% in April and only decreased 25% in June. This is a 50% increase in ridership, and we believe most of this is due to the shelter-in-place order being lifted at the end of May. Peak service has already been restored on the Green and Lime Express routes due to a sizable increase in ridership. Fare collection has been suspended since March, which I talked about earlier. The board and I are very aware of the financial impact that our customers are dealing with due to the pandemic. Our customers have been very thankful to us for the suspension of fares, as this is saving them on their transportation costs on a monthly basis. Before restoring fare collection, we have to ensure the safety of customers and operators. The fares box is positioned very closely to the driver on the bus, and we are installing a driver barrier. These barriers will protect the operator when customers are very close contact with each other. The board is taking a month-to-month approach and reviewing fare collection, and we are factoring in coronavirus cases in our community. When fare collection is restored, we want to give all of our riders a 30-day notice because this will have a financial impact on them. As we restore service and review the continuation of fare collection, we must provide essential transit service safely as ridership increases. Employees and customers will still be required to wear a face covering, and we want riders to practice safe physical distancing from each other. Regular cleaning and disinfecting of buses will continue. Some buses will be cleaned twice a day, and others will be cleaned once, but our entire fleet of buses will be cleaned every single day. Additional cleaning and disinfecting will increase expenses. I think constant cleaning of buses will be a new normal post-COVID. We're also providing another option for our customers to pay the fare beyond a cash or passes when we start collecting fares. Mobile ticketing provides a hands-free option to ride the bus. So mobile ticketing will allow for us to do fare capping, which is so important for our customers. Low-income customers cannot afford an upfront cost to buy a pass, and they end up spending twice as much on a monthly pass for transit. We're excited about adding mobile ticketing and believe it'll have a positive impact on our customers. Connect is also providing additional wayfinding and communication tools within the bus with the addition of interior bus displays. So for individuals who have hearing or hearing impaired, the displays will show the next bus stop information. We already have the ability to do automated vehicle announcements so that it announces the next stop. We want to also do a visual representation for those customers that are hearing impaired. This will also give us the option of selling additional advertising on those displays for revenue. And Connect can also create video content and display informational videos, safety videos, public service announcements on those interior displays. So we are excited about that as well. So now I want to discuss the budget challenges that we face due to the pandemic. In regards to state funding, IDOT, as I said, reimburses Connect 65% of our expenses and is our largest funding source. I want to provide some background on how IDOT provides funding to transit agencies. So a portion of the sales tax revenue is collected and goes into the downstate transit fund, and this funding is then distributed to transit agencies. Due to the pandemic, sales tax revenue has decreased, as we're well aware of. IDOT has informed downstate transit agencies, including Connect, the revenue is not known beyond our first quarter. Connect Transit started our fiscal year in July. Our first quarter would end in September. So the reason I believe that state funding is in jeopardy is because the state has requested a $5 billion federal grant or loan to balance the current state budget. It's also uncertain if this grant will be awarded by the federal government. State's also factoring in a graduated income tax that will need to be approved by voters to balance this current budget. So beyond the first quarter, we don't know if we'll be reimbursed 65%, which is required by state statute. We could see a reduced percentage of our expenses. For example, they may provide us 45% of our expenses instead of 65%. State lawmakers obviously will have very, very difficult decisions to make as we go through this fiscal year. I do have better news though, regards to the federal funding. Connect Transit did receive $9.1 million of federal CARES Act funding. Congress approved this funding to pay additional expenses due to the coronavirus and replace lost revenue. Connect may have to use all this CARES Act funding to continue operating if state funding is reduced. So this pandemic has also emphasized the importance for Connect and the use of our reserve funding. Connect was in a similar situation back in 2016 when the state did not have a budget. We used all of our reserve funding to continue providing service. Suspending service would be devastating for our customers and our community. So this concludes our update, and thank you for allowing Trustee Heil and I to make this presentation.
Thank you. Isaac, could you take your slide down?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me get mine oriented. So we have questions. First question, Mr. Nord.
Oh, I'm sorry. My hand was up from the last. I'll put that back down and re-raise after, give somebody else a chance.
Thank you. Ms. Smith.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this presentation, and I want to ask whether or not the council can still expect to see the full Connect Transit budget before the end of June, so that the council will have the opportunity to provide the oversight that the agreement requires us to do. Do you know if there are plans for that to be submitted to the council in time for our next meeting?
Yeah, we could submit that budget to the Town Normal Council if you guys want to review that. The board did approve that back in, I want to say April or May of this year. They approved that budget and was sent off to Illinois Department of Transportation.
Well,
Ms. Smith, I can certainly pass that along to council members, so I will do that.
Okay, I would ask that the council have the opportunity to review that so that we can continue to provide the oversight that we're charged with under the intergovernment agreement. And I do have to say kudos and thanks to so many of the working group who were volunteers from the community and worked very, very hard. I was at a number of these meetings, and many of them said they learned more about so many facets of transit system than they could possibly have recognized as being consistent. And I know that one of the things that they were very pleased with is the recommendation to adopt the single fare for all riders. Thank you for endorsing that. I do have one question that I don't think I got a satisfactory answer to in reading their report and going to the meetings. What is the rationale for Connect Transit not having some in their fleet that are the smaller buses? Because the recurring complaint we hear, or at least I do, from town residents is the number of times they see a Connect Transit bus that is not full. And it's understandable since the pandemic, but this was something that was a recurring item even before the pandemic. So could you please address that?
Yep, I think we all hear about the consistent complaint of large buses being a waste of tax dollars, only carrying 4 people. So I understand the residents, believe this. Large buses aren't cost effective because they're not full, but the statement just isn't based on data or financial analysis. So operating small buses will not save Connect Transit millions of dollars. Any savings would be minuscule and lead to lower customer satisfaction or possibly higher operating costs. Customer satisfaction is a primary driver of whether or not people choose public transportation or other transit options. Connect utilizes buses that meet our peak demand. This is exactly the same way that engineers build and design roads for peak demand of cars. So roads are built based on peak demand. Connect Transit has standardized our fleet to use larger buses because ridership indicates we need larger buses to meet our peak demand. So it's also very important to note that 75% of all of our operating costs, either for Connect Mobility or for fixed route transit, is due to the driver's wages and benefits. No different than any other service industry, wages and benefits is our majority of our cost. Our largest investment is in people and employees, not equipment. So we are hearing the complaints. We understand them. I think a lot of it is due to optics and not, like I said, financial analysis and data. But we are going to be mixing in additional 35-foot buses into our fleet. These will be battery electric, zero emission buses. They'll be much quieter and more cost effective in terms of operating costs. So we hear that complaint. We're not doing it because it's going to save us additional money. We're doing it because we've heard the complaint a lot and we want to be susceptible to it and change some of the ways that we're doing it. So I think Connect Transit has to do a better job of educating residents and people in the community about this issue.
And another.
Can I make a comment on that?
Yes.
Sometimes, depending on the person that asked the questions, sometimes I ask, did you make that observation on that bus while you were the sole occupant of your 5- and 6-person automobile?
Trust me, with my daughter in the condition she's in, her nickname is Velcro, so I'm very seldom in an automobile by myself. A second question on the working group recommendations. I see there was a recommendation to expand the mobility service to other limits. Has a process been identified whereby citizens could request that expansion of other routes be considered? Is that a new feature that will be available so that when there are changes in the community or the demand is there a process in place now for residents to request that a route be added or the consideration of adding a route be considered by the Connect Transit Board?
Isaac, do you want?
You want to go answer that, Trustee Howe?
Sure, I will. If you take a look, Ms. Smith, if you take a look at the 13th recommendation in the Connect to the Future set, you will see that, in fact, what you are describing is precisely our intention. We want to be attentive to additional fixed route, and I would also point out to you, we've heard from the public about fixed routes, but the Connect to the Future work group took that a step further, because we know that this whole movement of mobility toward mobility as a service it's coming, and so we're trying to get ahead of that. And so we've added on-demand service as another thing that we want to take a look at as a board, to select high density areas. And the bullets there have to do with what we know so far about what that process would look like. We are committed to benchmarking with other communities who have got the same kinds of requests. And our goal is to make sure it's an equitable and fair process. You will see that we have identified there the McLean County Regional Planning Commission, which has done such a good job of supporting us over the years as our go-to resource for making sure that our data is good and our process is solid as we deliberate on some of those requests.
And one final item, and I'm not sure if this is handled at the operational level or at the board, but a frustration that has been recurring is the inability to directly access board members. That just today I had it confirmed that on the Connect Transit site, if you wish to connect with the trustees, it is a single web contact that is provided. Here on the council, every elected member of the town council has their private or their unique email address, so that there is no question that you can connect directly with them. What would it take to implement a policy that whenever anybody is named to the Connect Transit board, that they are assigned a unique email address for their Connect business?
Yeah, I can answer that. Basically, it has to be redone in our bylaws, basically, to state some kind of policy of that. So right now, when somebody sends in an email, it goes to all of our board members. So one email goes to all the board members directly for any questions or comments that they may have.
So the board would have to vote on this?
Yeah, the board it'd have to be put into the, I would assume, I'd have to speak to our legal counsel, but I would assume it'd have to be put into some kind of policy, put into our bylaws. Board decides on how they're going to have that communication take place.
Well, I would ask that the Connect Transit board make that a priority, because I am aware that before the working group was created, that there were complaints that a number of citizens felt like they were being ignored because their emails apparently had not been delivered. And so that with Outlook, it's possible to have a red receipt. And I don't know that that really accomplishes anything if you have a generic email address to have any assurance that your message is received by the targeted decision maker. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Isaac and Julie, for coming and giving us the update, the good, the bad, and the difficult of it. I guess at the top, I want to say thanks to the operators and CT staff for keeping our system going. Clearly, it's proven to be very important to residents, lots of residents. I got a knock on my door this morning from a resident in my neighborhood who's mobility impaired, who saw that this was going to be on our agenda and wanted to share some thoughts. One of them being is how important bus is, and for her to be able to get around, and how much she's appreciated to continue to operate in. And pandemic, she showed up to my door, cane in hand and mask on face, share that information. So I want to pass it along. She also has some requests, so I'll share those offline with you, specifically not here relevant for this conversation, but I'll reach out to that. Thanks to the working group and the volunteer public for doing this, and for the board for getting behind coming up with this idea to create an opportunity for citizens broadly to talk about the future of our transit system. The report, had the opportunity to read it a few times and be on the phone with you guys individually to talk about it, and just great for the board being willing to open up and embrace a large-scale public input like this, and bring citizens through a process so we can really learn what the future of our transit should be according to the public. And so great job with that. Really appreciate all of that and it coming to fruition. And I guess I don't have specific questions. I think I've addressed some of those already when we had our conversation over the phone about that. I don't have any additional, but I do have a request for our body that we as a council have a discussion in the near future about the Connect to the Future request of increased funding. I know Bloomington's having that conversation. I've already talked to one member of the Bloomington Council about that. But I think we should at least schedule some time in the near future to have that discussion about where we stand and how we feel we're positioned to respond to that and the rest of the requests that are on the work group. Thank you.
Julie, Isaac, thank you for the presentation. There's been an incredible amount of work moving forward that's come out of the work group and raising awareness of the issues of Connect Transit, and we're seeing some very positive outcomes. And it's unfortunate that you, as well as the rest of us, have been put on a back burner by COVID-19, but appreciate the way you're responding to it. You're looking out for your drivers and your workers for their health and well-being, and trying to accommodate the people who do rely on you, the day in and day out, COVID or not, for transportation to work, to medical, and whatever. So we're strongly supportive of your role, and I echo what Mr. McCarthy said. We need to have that conversation about where we're going for funding to have an even more vital transit system going forward. And Mr. Nord, you had a comment?
I do. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. To add on to what Ms. Smith said about the IGA, I too would like to stress that the IGA get settled, because that was something that has been out there for a while. We also had the public, before the work group came about, the public was very vocal about people losing service, the ADA accessibility, bringing service back to some of the vulnerable areas. So, it seems like Connect is moving forward without addressing these major concerns. And those are going to come back to the forefront now that the work group is done and that the pandemic is coming to an end. So we do have to address those. I'd like to get some more detail on what the specific process is for the folks that would like bus service restored or new service added to a location. Are you still there?
Yeah. So basically what we've done, in addition to the work group recommendations, it kind of outlines exactly how that process is going to work in the future, is we've also partnered with McLean County Regional Planning, because we know there's service gaps throughout the community that we could be doing a better job serving. So McLean County Regional Planning, when we partner with them, we're going to be taking a look, as Judy said, and per the recommendations from the work group, at data, but also we want to find how the right service to fit the customer's need, whether that be on-demand transit service or a traditional fixed route transit service. but we don't want to just bring solutions. We just want to bring out options basically and have the community give us input on those to see what is the best way do we address this service gap area in the community. But we're going to be looking at data as well. So that process is going to be starting here in the next 6 months, where we're actually going to be doing public engagement, public input on how can we best serve some of the service gaps that we have throughout the community. But that is going to require additional investment from the city and town, as the work group recommendations state. We need additional funding to be able to do this.
Mr. Thorne, if I could also ask you to comment, though, that in coordination with McLean County Regional Planning Commission, you know, in terms of your route planning, your route additions, your route modifications, those are generally based upon generally accepted planning principles, of which the Federal Transit Administration supports. So it's not us creating our own criteria on how to evaluate routes. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, whenever that process gets put in place, I just want to make sure that it addresses the needs of our citizens. If we've got big groups of citizens that are voicing that they do need this service, that will be the priority, that we will not defer back to some document that says this is the best practice for other areas, because this service has got to meet the needs of Bloomington Normal. And you know, you're aware of the Ironwood Gardens, the Landings Trailer Park area, Midwest Food Bank, who has asked for bus service. So that area has been begging for going on well over 2 years now. So you know, every month they suffer.
If I could, I'm sorry, Mr. North, if I could add, I think what you're referencing, though, certainly we wouldn't throw out FTA planning principles, because they are a major funder of Connect Transit, and those are system-wide throughout the nation of how routes are determined. But I think what you're referencing is kind of the first mile, last mile kind of situation. And that's where Mr. Thorne and Ms. Heil have had conversations, I know, with lots of individuals regarding what are some solutions to that first mile, last mile. It might not be extending an entire fixed route to one particular neighborhood. It might be a hybrid solution of fixed, you know, that getting individuals from a neighborhood to a bus stop. So I just wanted to put that out there.
You're absolutely
correct. As long as they get service, I mean, they just need transportation to go from A to B. How that happens is more up to you guys. Another question was, ISU has been gone for nearly half a year. Have you seen savings from not running that route?
No. So here's the issue. When we stopped, we drastically reduced or saw a drastic reduction in ridership. We did cut our service, but we only cut back our peak service. So our employees still have the ability to use sick time if they're sick. We still put them to work cleaning buses. They still can take their vacation time. We laid off 0 employees throughout this pandemic. So that's why you did not see a reduction, even though we reduced service, you didn't see a reduction in the cost for providing that service.
So there wasn't fuel savings or other types of savings that were non-employee related?
I'm sure there was a little bit of fuel savings, but again, going back to our budget, if you look at this year's fiscal budget, 75 to 80% of our budget is made up of operations and benefits.
Okay, all right. I attended nearly every one of the work group meetings, and had intimate conversations with most of the work group members. And as a part of that recommendation, it was to be considered as a whole, not here's a list of recommendations, pick and choose. So keep that in mind, because that's what the intent of the folks that worked on that was. You said you received $9.1 million recently, and that a lot of that's going to go to reserves because you don't know where the funding is going to come from here in the future. What are
So
the
it doesn't-
total reserves?
Doesn't go to reserves. We can't just draw that funding down and put it in the bank. We have to incur an expense first, and then we get reimbursed by the federal government.
For the 9.1?
That's correct.
Okay, and is that operational or is that capital?
We can use it for operations or capital.
And how are you planning on using it?
So tonight during my presentation, I talked about us losing a majority of, or possibility of losing majority of our state funding, which is our biggest funding source at 65% of our expenses. There's talks, as I explained, there's some serious issues currently with the state budget. They're looking for a $5 billion loan or grant through the federal government. I'm not sure if they're going to receive that or not. They're also planning on a graduated income tax that has to pass voters. If that does not pass, there's going to be serious budget consequences as well. So we're not sure. I guess additionally too, transit in downstate is funded through sales tax receipts. We know those sales tax receipts are down. So we're not sure at this point. IDOT has not given us any guarantees beyond the first quarter, which ends in September, whether or not they're going to be able to reimburse us at 65%. They may cut it down to 30% or 45%. It is just an unknown right now. So majority of that funding the CARES Act funding may be applied to our operating budget over the next 2 years, because this pandemic has obviously caused some serious financial damage to the state budget as well.
Yeah, the pandemic's also going to affect local revenues as well. So I would not put too much confidence that either municipalities are going to have the money to make up for that loss, because we don't know where we're going to be either. What else did I have? The free service. One thing I'd like to say about that is there are so many areas in town that have zero service, low income areas, vulnerable, are most vulnerable, and the folks that I thought we were making a priority to serve. I would like to see additional service before we give free service. And
Can I just, as a point of clarification, Mr. Nord, we've
Sure.
been very careful to not call it free service because, as you can tell from this conversation, it is hardly free. We are extending that as a no fare service. And part of the reason we are using that language is to underscore that it is an investment in our community and in the riders who need the service. So no fare, but hardly fare free.
I'll just also add too, the board did not approve that. The board has pushed that off, the zero fare green route pilot, due to the pandemic. The board believes it's not a right time to be running a fare free zero pilot during a pandemic. So that has been pushed off to review at a later date.
Okay, good. And then my last comment is, you had spoke about the buses and the bus size. I know we've had this conversation over and over again about the bus size and it taking service away from hospitals and, just pushing further and further away and not getting to areas. If the buses are too large and they cannot reach the people that need it, they cannot get into those neighborhoods, they can't go down the roads, then in my mind, us saving a few dollars to have these super large buses, even if it costs us a little bit of money or a little bit more money to serve the people, that is an investment that we should do, because this transportation system should first and foremost serve those people that need it. And if, by no fault of their own, they live in neighborhoods that the big buses cannot serve, we need to get the buses that fit this community. So thank you again for coming in.
Yep, I think in that instance, Councilmember Nord, I think we're talking about a first mile, last mile solution into communities that have maybe tighter neighborhoods and less dense populations. That's where a first mile, last mile transit solution worked much, much better than a traditional fixed route service. So there are different modes that require different size buses when we're talking about low density areas. So just want to add that.
Yeah, well, maybe I should explain or just give a couple more examples of the locations. So there's trailer parks on Bunn Street by State Farm Park. There's Section 8 housing out on Fox Creek Road. So these are big areas. And then pretty much everything down there at the south end of Veterans Parkway. So it's not just normal that I'm thinking about. You know, I'm really thinking about the entire community whenever I speak. So take that into perspective.
Yeah, I would just say too, those areas are still classified by the Plain County Regional Planning as low density areas.
And Mr. Nord, I would point out that again, 3 or 4 people have responded and said it's a first mile, last mile solution. They are aware of it. It's not like they're neglecting these areas, but they do not. They are taking steps to better serve those areas, be it on-demand service or whatever. It's not a one bus solution that fits every environment. I think that's been very clear tonight. Ms. Smith, did you have another comment or a question?
I just wanted to take this opportunity to point out that when the working group was looking at some of the information from McLean County, some of the areas mentioned by Mr. Nord as in need were not represented on their census tracts. So I wonder whether or not everyone who lives in those areas has participated in the census. And I want to take this opportunity to emphasize the importance of making sure you complete that census form, because if you're not represented, you're not going to be factored into the decisions when we can't tell who you are, where you are, and what kind of services might be appropriate. So the April 1 was the opening date of this. It's available online. Unfortunately, with the libraries still not completely open, those computers to get assistance aren't there yet. But I'm urging everybody who has not yet completed their census form to please do that, because it will be critical to matters like transportation. And that's my soapbox. So thank you for calling on me again.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yeah, Ms. Smith and I are channeling, apparently. So this conversation has funding implications. Not taking a position on route selection and which neighborhood the 2 points. One is, and I won't kick a horse already mentioned, but census. If it's not being identified as an area of need, we've got a problem and we've got a funding gap there. But also why I'm calling for a council discussion is these last mile solutions are going to cost money. And although we can talk about don't look to us for money, but then ask you to spend money to solve a problem is really a mixed message from us. And so that's why I think we have to step back as a group and decide where we're going to be. If we're going to ask the transit system to respond and spend more money to solve problems, then we as a body have to also be able to respond to fund that. That money isn't going to come from everywhere. Mr. Thorne has given us not a positive, rosy picture of funding of our transit system going forward. And so we don't have money trees that we can grow this on. So again, I'm going to urge us to have a conversation, whatever that conversation ends up being, that we have it as a group and we come forward with, if we're making more asks, that we have a solution. Thanks again for your presentation.
And thanks for joining us tonight and giving us the update. I'm sure there'll be more questions coming your way, and you've been incredibly responsive going through this process. Again, the work that came out of the work group, it was a bumpy ride, but the end product was well worth the bumps and a great product from Connect to the Future group. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 15 is a motion to approve appointments and reappointments to various boards, commissions, and committees.
I move that.
Second.
Thank you. A little change up that we thought was appropriate. Mr. McCarthy is going to read those appointments before we vote and reappointments.
Okay, there's a long list. Starting with reappointments to the CDM Foundation Board, Elise Albers, Samuel Gray, Teresa Prosser, and Mitch Stiebel. To Historic Preservation Commission, Kristen Allen. To Human Relations Commissions, Louis Figueroa and Janessa Williams. To the Planning Commission, Bob Broad, Mike Matika, Tracy Wittergren. To the Uptown Design Review Commission, Kyle Glandon, Rick Kensler, and Charles McGuire. To the Zoning Board of Appeals, Todd Anderson, Corrine Brand. New appointments to the Building Board of Appeals, Jeremy Wilcox. To the Connect Transit Board, Timothy McHugh. To the Police Pension Board, Chief Rick Bleichner. And to the Zoning Board of Appeals, Darren Sampson.
And I'm sorry, did that include the new appointments?
Yes, they were. I did them in order on our.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is your hand up from the previous, Mr. McCarthy? Thank you. Before we go to vote.
Yes, if I may. I just want to express a little bit of frustration. Well, first of all, I do have to say I'm very appreciative of the fact that we are putting before the council a member, a nominee to fill the Normal's representation on the Connect Transit, so that we will once again be fully represented on that body. I do want to express some frustration that this information about this specific individual was not readily available in enough time to talk with that person, because as you've noted, Mayor Coos, this has been quite the volatile topic for quite a number of months. And it would have been appreciated to have had the opportunity to speak with this individual and find out their thoughts on certain policies of the Connect Transit Board, because I've had individuals reach out to me expressing their interest in, well, we need to, as a council, make the Connect Transit Board do this or do that. And you heard me indicate a preference for separate email addresses. The Connect Transit Board is acting as an independent governing body that those board members have to make those calls and move those actions forward. And so without having the opportunity to speak to this individual in advance, I don't have any sense of whether or not I can feel comfortable that this person will in fact support some of the things that constituents have identified as priorities. I did get the confirm the information today that the Town of Normal has on their website an opportunity for private citizens to, in essence, apply for some of these positions as they come open. But since you're the one making these appointments, Mayor Coos, would you be willing to share your process in identifying individuals for positions and vetting them, and how, if someone is interested, how can they express that desire forcefully and actively campaign for a role?
Thank you. I'm going to let everybody comment and then I'll respond. Mr. Nord? You're on mute, Mr. Nord.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna wait for the response.
And I'm not going to give the response until you make a comment.
I don't want to give up my chance to speak, and really, depending on what you say, I don't know if I will even have a comment.
This is a very unusual process, I will say, in the sense that we have never gone this path before. I will make one of my comments. The reason that seat has been empty so long is because it has been so heavily politicized that frankly, people I have reached out to ask consideration to join this board have told me there was no way they would do that because it's such a political hot potato and has been made such a political hot potato. So I will say that for 50 years or better, these appointments have been mayoral appointments, and the vote of the board of the trustees here is a validation that they think the mayor is doing a good job in appointing people. I have appointed people for 18 years. I have never been challenged on that process. Tonight, I'm being personally challenged on my appointment to the board that you, Ms. Smith, and I think you, Mr. Nord, are heading that direction, that you do not trust my judgment or my process for these appointments. So to your question, Ms. Smith, the process is twofold. As you know, on our website, we have access to requests for appointments to boards. And oftentimes we do get people to request for boards. Very often there are times that there are no vacancies on those boards, but we keep them on file. And we, you know, I'll vet the people that have asked for those appointments. On Connect Transit, I have had to go out and find people to do this. And again, I will reiterate, because of the political heat of what's going on in Connect Transit and the arguments and that have been going on, it has been very difficult to find somebody. Now, going forward, if the council doesn't feel that the mayor should have the right to appoint people to the board without full council interviews to the candidates for this process, then we need to take that up at retreat and change the process. I do take it personally that you feel that I am not able to make an appropriate appointment to the board. I have spent a lot of time on this. I have talked to people. I have talked to people that know this appointee that we're making tonight to verify that indeed they do have a position on this board. So that's the process where we are right now. And I see a lot of hands raised here. Ms. Lorenz, if we'll go first. I do want to caution people, we are not going to talk about this appointee tonight. You can vote yes or no on that. We are not going to get into a public interview process or questions about this individual. If you are uncomfortable, by all means.
Thank you, Mayor. I am not going to speak about a particular individual, but raised my hand because I want to address this question of process. As being somebody who's gone through the process of being appointed at different points to commissions, be it Zoning Board of Appeals or later Planning Commission, it is a great opportunity. I'm glad to see that we have a process on the website. Go under the government tab, fill out a form. You can click any or all of the commissions that are interest you, answer some questions, and upload a resume. I think that is a wonderful piece of the process. The ultimate, buck stops here, so to speak, is and has been for 50 years with the mayor. And I support that process for two reasons. One, it's efficient. To do otherwise, to try to herd the 7 minds in making decisions would create, I think, an inefficiency that would hamper the ability to make a decision. And, we are always very conscious on this council about being wasteful of taxpayer dollars. And, any waste, any redundancy, any duplication of effort is wasteful and non-value add. And I feel like a group effort on this would lead us down that path of inefficiency. The second reason is that it would be ineffective, because even if we succumb to that less efficient process, who in their right mind would stand for an interview in the public forum? I just think we would find ourselves with an unintentional consequence of quality candidates saying thank you, but no. And so I think we have to keep that in mind as well. That's all I'd like to say.
I think we've set forth a process here. If indeed you want to change this process, we need to bring this up at our next strategic retreat. The motion before us is a motion to approve appointments and reappointments.
If I may, Mayor,
Ms. Briscoe, right ahead.
I just wanted to clarify. I am in no way challenging your ability to select qualified candidates. What I'm trying to express is my sense that there's public concern, and it's a perception issue. And so I do think this was a conversation best handled in our retreat. And if there is anything that can be done to accomplish that, I have no doubt that this individual is qualified, or you would not have named him. And I do want to welcome him to his role on the Connect Transit Board, and other ideas about the process itself. I'll reserve for a retreat when we can get into the weeds about how we tackle the perception issue, and how we can in fact get more people to feel that their services are welcomed and there is a place for them, even if their initial the opportunity they initially identified isn't available. Because as working with church organizations, one of the things that they emphasize there is you make people feel welcome by giving them a job to do. And when we have people that express an interest, I would just like to see a better way to give that outlet to individuals that make that request. And I'll reserve that discussion for a retreat. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will again point out that in the 18 years I have done this, this issue has never been raised. And it's because of the back and forth and the disagreement on Connect Transit that has happened here. So it's not an issue of we are failing in our appointment process. We just are having an appointment in a very volatile, divisive situation here. That's what we're dealing with today. Mr. North.
Thank you. The whole Connect Transit issue is something that persisted, gosh, well before I even decided to run for the council. So this has been going on in the community for a long time.
I completely go ahead and state your point.
Well, this is coming from the folks in the community. The ADA advocates, the folks that are the advocates in these vulnerable areas, Orlando and Northbrook. They have been battling this long ago. But it may not have been brought to your attention. It may have all been directed at Connect Transit. Now, the IGA spells out that the town council, we are the ones that are the ultimate folks responsible. It's not the mayor, it is the town council as a whole. So, we have to consider that. And this is for any appointment. We are just asked to approve who the mayor picks. And for me personally, I'm someone that I have to understand the issue before I give my vote. My vote is my word, is the way that I look at it. And I just don't feel comfortable, essentially being asked to rubber stamp, especially for this issue, because this has been such a hot topic. This appointee may be perfect, but without being afforded the opportunity to discuss with him or her their views on the pieces that I feel are major issues, then it puts me in a bad spot. And also, we wouldn't be doing something that's unheard of. Bloomington has a process where when the mayor wants to appoint someone, he first lets the council know, and it's done quietly. So that way the council can have interviews, they can discuss with these folks. And that is all done before it's made public that this is who the mayor wants to appoint. That way it limits the amount of risk of embarrassment for someone that wants to volunteer for a position. So we would not be unique. And there's plenty of other communities in Illinois that do the same thing. So that's all I ask, is that we afford our council members who are ultimately responsible the opportunity to just have an interview with whomever it is you want to appoint before that becomes public.
Mr. McCarthy.
Can we take the process discussion to retreat?
That was going to be my point.
Can we
we've
get on with the vote?
Talking
about process.
We'll take this to retreat, and if the council decides that the mayor should not appoint anymore, that the council as a whole should appoint, we will make that change. That is our prerogative as the council. Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord. You're muted.
You're on mute, Mr. Nord.
Oh, I'm sorry. I abstain.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Ms. Cummings.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The appointments are approved. Before taking a motion for adjournment, are there concerns or comments?
Mayor, do you want me to read?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, read the new appointments.
Okay. I will do the abridged version of this. To the Building Board of Appeals, Mr. Jeremy Wilcox as an electrical representative. We all know Wilcox Electric in the community. He's been in the electrical contracting industry for 26 years for RBW Local 197, working in the family business since 1996, an ICC certified master electrician. 23 took over Wilcox as the accredited head representative with the NECA, and is the principal for Wilcox Electric Service. He's married to his wife, Nicole, as a sign language interpreter for ISU at the Metcalf Lab School, and as a daughter, Lydia, who will be starting 8th grade at Metcalf this year. Mr. Timothy McHugh, the subject of some of our last conversation, to Connect Transit Board. He's a normal resident, currently serves as the area coordinator in the University Housing Services at ISU. I spent more than 20 years as an advocate, educator, and public speaker on issues of accessibility, mobility, and disability experience in multiple states. He's previously worked with local convention and visitor bureau in Ohio and Oklahoma, promoting accessibility issues in restaurants and businesses. He's currently an active member of the Bike and Pedestrian Steering Committee, and has served on similar advisory committees in Stillwater, Oklahoma, prior to being a Normal. Mr. Rick Bleichner, as we all know, Chief Bleichner, will fill a vacancy on the Police Pension Board. Some fun facts you may not know about Mr. Bleichner. He's been with the department since '91, last 9 years as chief. He's got a criminal justice bachelor's degree from Western Illinois, graduate degree from Northwestern School of Police Staff Command, and the FBI National Academy. He's been an active member in the Minority and Police Partnership in McLean County since 2004, and served as the organization's co-chair in 07 and 08 and 16 to 18, and is an active member in both the International and Illinois Chiefs of Police Association, FBI National Academy, Chiefs of Larger Illinois Cities, McLean County Mental Health Advisory Board, the Metro Communications and Emergency Telephone Systems Board for McLean County. He and his wife have 3 children and been here for the last 25 years. And finally, Mr. Darren Sampson, filling a vacancy on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Mr. Sampson's been a Normal resident for the past 40 years with a degree from ISU, currently vendor relationship manager with State Farm. He's held several positions within State Farm area of fire claims. He's been actively involved in the Sister City community program, an active volunteer already on other boards for our community. And he described himself as a weekend DIY project person with his wife, Michelle. We welcome them to our boards as new board members.
Thank you. Again, before an adjournment, are there concerns or comments? I dropped the screen here. Ms. Cummings?
Yes, I just wanted to just say happy birthday to you. Today's your birthday, and you had to spend your lovely evening with us. So wanting to wish you a very happy birthday, and I hope that it was very special throughout the day.
Thank you. Mr. Nord?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to thank the town staff for going out on College and repairing potholes. There's lots of brand new coal pack that's down there. So thank you, staff. And Mr. Mayor, I wanted to thank you for your comments that started the meeting tonight, the first meeting we had, where you talked about that this is a legal meeting, because there's lots of folks out there that had questions about this. So by speaking to that, I think that has put people's minds to rest, that, you know, it's been openly talked about and that we're operating under what we assume is what we're supposed to. So thank you for putting that out there, and happy birthday.
Thank you. Mr. McCarthy?
Happy birthday. Said it earlier, say it again. Also, a quick plug. As we all know, the craft beer festival isn't happening, but we have the replacement of the craft beer bingo going on with for this as a fundraiser for the Children's Discovery Museum. You can get bingo cards at the Discovery Museum store or online. We've got all of our local breweries and Medici, obviously the sponsor of the festival itself. Go around town, get some stamps. There's prize drawings, but proceeds from the cards and the event help fund, raise, and support programs for kids at the Children's Discovery Museum. It's going on from July 1st to July 31st. You can submit up to 5 cards. That means you can do 5 laps around microbreweries here if you want to, but it all goes to help support kids programs with our CDM. So just a plug for that.
And Ms. Smith?
A reminder to all parents who have special needs, members of their family, the SOAR registration is tomorrow. There are limited offerings because of the size limitations for the gatherings. So your best bet is to do it electronically. I hope everybody has a chance to get their family member in some activity so that they have an opportunity to be outside of familiar faces within their family's 4 walls. Mr. Mayor, if you're interested, I can sing you happy birthday doing either an Ethel Merman, Katharine Hepburn, or Marilyn Monroe impression, but we'll save that for the retreat too. Good night.
Mr. Nord, you have another comment?
Oh, yes. I forgot to mention this. Midwest Food Bank is having a raffle drawing. It is for a tiny home that they say is worth about $50,000. And, you know, if you've been in Bloomington Normal for any amount of time, you know the great work that they do. So please tell your friends, go online, buy a ticket, and thank you for letting me speak again.
Yep, and that is an organization that our community should be incredibly proud of. Anytime that they need help, I'm there and the town is there. So thank you for mentioning them, Mr. Nord. Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mrs. Loren?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Ms. Cummings?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.